This is an apartment building
Right,
across.
that's like that.
But then these ones are across from each other.
I didn't think anybody was moving in those yet.
Yep, we did. We're the first one.
You're the first one. So we're good, right? Welcome to the March 7th City of Des Moines Plan and Zoning Commission meeting. These are our rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold public hearing and make a final decision on all matters before the Commission other than site plans and subdivision plats unless denials or conditional approvals are appealed. Please contact the city clerk or the community development staff for details on council hearings. Applicants are given 10 minutes to present their request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order with a maximum of 5 minutes. The applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed in the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless an individual present or a member of the commission requests that item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. The City of Des Moines is pleased to provide accommodations to individuals or groups with disabilities and encourages participation in city government. Assisted listening devices are available for meetings in this room. To better serve you when possible, please notify the city at least 3 business days in advance at 515-283-4209. Should special accommodations be required. Plan and Zoning Commission meetings are broadcast on MediaCom cable channel 7.1 or 7.2 for customers with that service. Transportation for the City of Des Moines meetings can be scheduled to and from DART Central Station at 620 Cherry Street. To reserve your route, please call DART on-call scheduling at 283-8136. Calls for trips will be accepted up until 5 p.m. of the day prior to the meeting. And please be sure to mention in your request that you are requiring transportation for a City of Des Moines meeting at this location. This notice is intended to comply with accessibility requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. All right, it looks like we have a quorum established. Is there a motion to approve your brief meeting of February 21st?
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the meeting minutes from February 21, please signify by raising your hand. Got it. Okay, besides me, is there anyone else who wasn't present and needs to abstain? Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll go through the consent items. And as previously mentioned, unless someone from the public wishes to remove this item or a commission member, then the commission votes on the staff recommendation. Item number 1 is a city-initiated request to rename a segment of East Douglas Avenue to Kennedy Drive for a segment which is located between Hubble and a point 660 feet to the west as part of realignment of East Douglas Avenue. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes us to remove this item? All right, seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wants to hear this item? All right, seeing none, that item will remain on consent. Item number 2 is a request from Polk County for review and approval of a site plan Lauritzen Skate Park under design guidelines in downtown riverfront districts on property located at 901 2nd Avenue to allow for development of a 5.7 acre outdoor skating recreation facility with a 470 square foot restroom building. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes us to pull this item from consent? All right, seeing none, is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? All right, and so that concludes our consent items. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor of the staff recommendations and consent items, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. All right, so the first item on the public hearing tonight is continued from our January 17th meeting. This is a request from DDS Worldwide Cargo for, and number A, I just want to know it was withdrawn. So the request then would be for B, C, and D in your agenda.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. I'll show a couple of images just to get us familiar with the site and then delve into the proposal. Subject property, south side of Capitol Avenue, east 21st Street to the east, Walnut to the south. The applicant's primary business location is to the west of the subject property. As noted by the chair, there had been a request to vacate alley. That's been withdrawn as that there wasn't an agreeable solution with another adjoining property owner as to how to divide out shared access. The cards and a communication from the neighborhood association are being passed around. That's the response map. Going back to this aerial, the blue lines represent the zoning boundary. So to the west, zone M1 light industrial, subject property, and the residential dwellings to the east are zone R160, single family zoning classification. As noted in the agenda, this does require a land use plan amendment. This area, this is kind of the line where the future land use map shows industrial uses to the west and residential uses to the east. So that would be part of the proposal. In the staff report, we referenced a couple of sketches that have been submitted by the applicant showing their general concept for the site. We are not considering a site plan tonight. This is rezoning. These are conceptual. There's a lot of process should the property be rezoned for them to go through. One concept would comply with the setback requirements for the M1 district. You can see the 25-foot separation from the residential, 25 front yard setback, showing kind of the arrangement of how they would park trailers on the site. If they were successful in obtaining relief from the zoning board adjustment, they also had shown this as a concept, which if the board gave them some setback relief, it allowed them to have a little more, a little larger of an area. But these are just conceptual, give you a sense of why they want to do this, their purpose. We're not approving these as part of this process. So as staff, we looked back at the site, looked at the comp plan, and are making a recommendation that the comp plan not be amended. Therefore, the rezoning cannot be approved. We think that pushing the industrial development further to east is just going to further impede the ability for the single-family block around it to be successful in the future, and feel that it's appropriate to kind of use this alley that's historically been used as a dividing line. So that is our recommendation. We do recognize that if there, there could be interest in doing something here from your perspective in a recommendation. In our staff report, in the body of the report, we did identify some conditions that we wanted to share with you if you are interested in that. But I do want to reiterate that we've put those in there as additional food for thought for you, but our recommendation is to deny the request. So happy to answer your questions.
Questions? Okay, seeing none. Applicant available.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Rick Baumover with Bishop Engineering, 3501 104th Street in Urbandale, representing the applicant DDX Worldwide Cargo here. Yes, we're back again before you. There was the last time there was issues with understanding the use and importance of that alley to our neighbor to the south. Due to logistics and timing, it wouldn't work out to have any type of shared use of that. So we've dropped that vacation request. That simplified our site plan, and that's why we were back. I think the recommendation at the last meeting was for us to kind of see if we could work something out and also come with a little more clarity to what it was we were proposing to do in the future. And I think with the two proposed site plans, we show quite clearly what our intended uses with that property that we're asking to be rezoned. The reason for the request is because the site as it is now has a lot of building. It's a two-story, it's a large warehouse. There's not a lot of space outside of it for parking, for storage. It's used in a warehouse basis with trailers and trucks and tractors. Some tractors go off-site to move trailers around for other businesses in the area. Some trailers are stored there on a short-term basis while cargo is waiting to be delivered to other places. So they kind of have a little bit of an eclectic mix of things moving in and out. Historically, that site has been kind of used for that. Yes, we understand that we're up against pushing into a residential area here, but as you can see in the photos, we're the west half of the lot, in line, is already kind of bumped in. We have M1 zoning to the south of us. We have some M1 zoning to the north of us on the west half of the parcel. Here. So this is M1 here, and this is M1 here. So there is a notch. We're kind of moving the notch from the one side to the other side, but I think we agree that, and I understand that there's the pressure between the industrial and the residential side, but I think that's partly because the way things were done in the past, there wasn't enough space for this business to have space for parking, and we're seeing that need to gain more property to make it work effectively. And I showed this exhibit last time as well, but already 12 years ago in 2005, there was a site plan or a survey made dividing this property into two pieces, a north piece, which was the residential, and a south piece, which was vacant, which was said to be on the plat survey to be used with the business to the west. I think it would just remain vacant, and maybe it was for parking or other uses that they could do in a residential area. But I think it points to the fact that that business has needed more space to grow and work effectively. And the client and the cities made the conditions that if this is approved, that this property only be used for storage or parking or green space. And we're in agreement with those uses. And I think those uses will help transition from this industrial to the residential by limiting that. This will kind of provide some of that buffer spacing between the two uses. I guess with that, I really don't have anything more to explain or to say other than there's the pressures on this business to have more storage, more parking, and he's kind of done the responsible thing is buying both parcels, getting them joined together, and trying to find room to expand the business. And in order to do that, we need to rezone this property and use as much of it as we can for storage or parking, and that's why we have the two concept types. Because with that, I'll answer any questions or
questions. All right, seeing none. Thank you, Jack.
Jackie?
Sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
You have two proposed or sketch site plans. Is there one or the other that you prefer, or?
Well, certainly the one with the Board of Adjustment action where we can get an exception to the side yard setback as a preferred, there's a preferred route is to get as much space as we can, as the two examples showed. I'll go back to that. This being our preferred example, where we're able to get, we can get more trailer storage in on the site. Our ultimate goal is to get more storage space because the site as it is now on the west side of the alley is landlocked. There's railroad on one side, streets on the other. There's nowhere to turn except to go east. And so our preferred site plan would be to see if we can get Board of Adjustment action to give us an exception. If not, then we're left with our other alternate, which is Plan B, which is just storage on what we could do without Board of Adjustment, which would certainly be half the storage and half the space that we would get with this.
Anyone else with questions?
And the owner, Juan Gauman, is here tonight if there's any questions of the owner as well.
Okay, thank you. I just said, what alternate plans do you have for not using that north-south alley?
Pardon me? Oh, for the fact that we're not using that alley? Well, we're not going to include, our hope was is if we could have vacated that alley, we would have more land to deal with, to work with. But since it became too difficult to organize in logistics when trucks would come for our neighbor and for us to somehow have a shared use private alley through there, that was too difficult to do, so we dropped. I did have, at the last meeting we were at, the owner, Scott Denning, to the south, was the first time we met him, and got a little bit heated discussion because we hadn't talked with him in the past. I did take these site plans. I don't think he's here tonight, but there he is. I did take these plans to him a couple weeks ago and showed those to him. I think Scott was fine with what we're doing here. He doesn't have a problem with us, with our business or what we're doing on the rezoned property. He just needed that alley open, and obviously we didn't understand that.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
I'm reading this letter from the Fairground neighborhood. Tell me about how that went when you went and visited with them, or did you? This letter just basically talks about not agreeing with the alley vacation.
I guess unfortunately, I haven't seen that letter.
Oh.
I sent an email. I wanted to have our neighborhood meeting with their meeting in January, and I sent an email to the address that was on the website, and apparently that didn't go anywhere. So I didn't follow up with that website address to follow up and see.
515-255-080.
Well,
it's all right.
It was January. Christmas time. I was trying to get that scheduled, and it didn't happen. But
seems like an important piece to the puzzle, what the neighborhood feels. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. So at this time, is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of the request? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to oppose the request? So seeing none, I guess this is a chance for you to respond, and since there's no need to respond, I will close the public hearing. And Commission, what is your pleasure? Carry the staff recommendation again.
I got a question, maybe Mike, or Jason. So are they currently using the property in this fashion, and did Sue-Ann go out? And I mean, how did we get here?
I'm not sure on the exact enforcement history as far as what kind of notices or anything like that. I mean, if you look at the aerial, I mean, there has been use of the property. I believe that's been cleaned up. Is that correct?
They were cited.
Yeah,
they were cited.
So I'm a big proponent of the neighborhood association and what they say, but I feel like they're addressing more the alley
That's right.
or the using Capitol Avenue, the Brick Street. So I don't know if they're upset. I mean, is that really
I
addressing
believe
the
it said that
lots?
they did not support, they wanted to deny this.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure.
I thought it just said alley.
It's just they're concerned about
alleys.
Capitol going out on the Brick Street. But do they really address? Because I look at, I can see where it makes sense to try to align. We're not really moving the line that much. Or
Do we know if
I'm not being very articulate about this, but I don't know. Can we ask that?
Taylor, what's your question?
Do they plan to exit out of Capitol, or could we?
So the question is, where will you be exiting for your
Walnut.
either one? Walnut?
Primarily Walnut, but I don't think what they propose to do isn't really going to change too much from what's going on there today. So they can come in from Capitol and they can exit through Walnut and using that alley. Or they come in on Walnut, back in, and then leave. But I think primarily, they want to use Walnut primarily. That's the more major street, yeah.
I guess my question for staff would be, the applicant is suggesting that if we support the recommendation to deny,
What stipulation?
that
Rezoning?
they're going to go another route through the Board of Adjustment. Is that a viable route for them?
Well, if the rezoning is not approved, they could seek a use variance, but what was discussed mostly was about the setback relief that would be required if the property was either zoned M1, or if they got a use variance. Part of that action would be to also ensure they'd be asking for the setback relief. So
I'll unpack a little bit. I kind of buy the argument that, staff kind of rests their opposition on the fact that we're pushing this industrial zone into the residential, but I do buy the fact that this is a jig-jaggy line. If you look at the screen that we have, if you draw a straight line between the two blue lines, you're essentially in the middle of the lot, and that 25-foot setback scheme that they have, if they don't go to the Board of Adjustment, would essentially be that. And so I'm kind of inclined to, I don't know how we tell them don't take it to the Board of Adjustment and don't pass that, because that's their right, but that's my inclination, is to say, okay, if you don't go past that line, then it makes some sense to me. So I'm kind of disagreeing with staff and would agree with putting the rest of the restrictions on and see where it goes. But I haven't put that in a motion yet. That's a thought.
Anyone want to extend the thought?
You want me to put it in a motion?
I didn't know, Greg, if you were referencing
Yes,
these items,
I
so I
was.
thought you might want to. Everybody might want to see them.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So Greg, based on what you just stated, if you were considering the conditions that were listed in the staff report, probably would need to be an addition, would state no storage or parking within 25 foot of the east lot
Yeah.
line.
If that
zoning condition was agreed to by the applicant and approved by council, this owner and any future owner could not go to the Board of Adjustment to seek relief to that. They'd have to for a rezoning.
then that's what I would propose to do. Can we ask?
So the condition you would put is that we not ask for that Board of Adjustment relief on that east 25 feet.
Yes.
If I may, it wouldn't be word of going to the no but my any relief for the reason.
Well,
But again, wouldn't that have to be affirmed by the council?
Yes.
So I think there's like two steps. What we would recommend and then what the council would affirm.
what you're recommending is that we're locked into our Plan B, which is the minimal amount of storage on this lot. And
So you're locked into Plan B or nothing.
correct. Or Plan C is we live with what it is now and nothing there. The site really needs the parking. And over time, as you can see, and that's how he got in violations, is that was used for parking and storage. And he's trying to do the right thing, get in compliance, get things cleaned up, and make his business work there. And I don't think it's unfortunately, I haven't been able to, I didn't get to the neighborhood association. I don't know what their concerns are, but it's not an abrupt change to the neighborhood. It's kind of functioning that way already. The lady next door, talked with her. He was just concerned that her fence stay up, and we said, yes, we're not going to affect that. So the most closest neighbor is not opposed to this. And as we talked about, it is kind of a jaggedy line. I think this industrial site needs some relief to be a viable parcel and lot. I understand you got to draw the line somewhere, because where is it going to end down the line? But I think putting these conditions on that lot kind of provides a buffer. There's not going to be a building there. There's not going to be, a lot of activity there. That's going to provide the buffering between the industrial and the purely residential use. So, I guess I don't know what to say, whether we can live with that or not, or take our chances with the Board of Adjustment. Juan, what do you?
But actually, you're not really.
You have a motion.
We're really not kind of debating what you're saying. We're going to
I think I'll just go
discuss
ahead.
the motion.
I think I'll just go ahead and make a motion that Part B is correct. We find it not in conformance. But Part C would be that we amend the comprehensive plan to allow the zoning change. And then Part D would be those items listed in the prior part of the staff report that Jason has up here on the screen, plus F, not allowing any storage in the east 25 feet of the lot. And if we can, a G, no truck traffic on Capitol. We can do that.
How wide is the lot, Greg? Got an idea?
My eyes aren't that good.
How wide's the lot, Rich?
The parcel we're talking about 77 feet wide.
The crosshatched lot is 77 feet wide.
Yes, 77 feet wide.
That leaves them 52 feet to work with.
Yep. 52 feet more than they had.
Mhm.
How long are those trailers?
53-foot trailers, and you need a little room to maneuver. So,
So put the short ones in there.
Park them at angles?
pardon me?
Park them at angles?
I like,
On the north
And
side,
could you say your name and address?
on the north side, on Capitol, there's another business right here that they use Capitol all the time. So it's not ours just using Capitol for the business. So if you see right here, folks come in here all the way to Capitol and they back in, or they turn around in here and they go out to Capitol. So everything right here is being used for a business purpose, trucking.
So I know that you're the owner. Could you say your name and address for the record?
Oh, my name is Juan Waman. Address is 2000 East Walnut Street in Moines. So I don't think if you guys put a restriction on us not using Capitol, it will be just us, not the neighbor. And I don't think that's fair, because other trucks will be using Capitol anyway.
I'm looking at curb cuts maybe on this picture. Are there curb cuts on Capitol there? A narrow driveway entrance, or what's going on the east side and by the alley there? Is that just an alleyway width? Rich, you can answer.
You're talking about on the north side?
The east side of those, where did it go? The east side of the existing lot. Okay, so what's going on here? Is that a curb or what?
There is driveways in and out through the alley, north and south.
There's no curb on the alley.
I see these grass patches is what I'm talking about on the north. I don't see grass patches on the south end. That's not.
Which way would you like?
Thank you're with me there. Yeah, what's going on there?
That's grass.
I mean, is it real easy to drive into Capitol with a semi-truck off the alley, is my question.
Well, those are some overhead doors for like a single door,
Right.
not a. Those are, you see approaches there, or overhead park.
There's an entrance in there.
So I'm trying to get to Greg's concern about the traffic going on to Capitol from this lot if it's got a narrow entrance, whereas the other end is the full width of the parking facility. I'm sensitive to what Mr. Gallman's saying.
Well, as of now, we have a motion.
So how about if they try to restrict?
What?
They do their best not to use capital.
So on G, you instead of no.
Part of the problem is there are other businesses there, even the one to the south of this may use capital already, and we have no control over it. We certainly don't have any control over the one to the north. And so I do respect, but I agree, it's a narrow restriction, and they're probably going to use it less than the way easy one on the south, and so hopefully that's the way that it works. And I'm okay if we don't put that restriction in. I just think it's a good idea.
Not at all. I thought maybe you wanted to say limited.
Well, it's a public alley, so anything could drive up and down that alley to access Capitol Avenue, so I think it's.
Remove it.
The question
So we
is
don't have
what-
to have that one.
You're removing that.
Remove G. Remove G. It was an idea.
So are you good with that?
Yes, we are where I thought we would be.
So in summary, the motion is, of course, we no longer have Part A that was withdrawn. There will be no vacation. Part B was that the staff was recommending that the requested zoning is not in conformance, which is true. So that still holds. Part C and D, we will recommend a requested amendment to the Plan Des Moines future land use map, and will recommend rezoning, correct, with the following provisions or restrictions or guidelines. A, no buildings shall be constructed on the property. B, off-street parking, outside storage of trailers and equipment or open space shall be limited, shall be only permitted uses of the property. C, any off-street parking shall be paved and maintained with a Portland cement, concrete, or hot mix asphalt material. D, any outside storage not used for off-street parking shall either be paved or surfaced and maintained with the recycled asphalt product to ensure dust-free. E, any use of the property shall be in accordance with the site plan as approved by the Permit and Development Center, including landscaping and buffering as applicable to the C2 district. And F, no storage in or parking within to the east within 25 feet. All right. Commission, all of those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Are there any that are opposed? Do we have any abstentions?
David, were you opposed?
Yes.
Okay.
And were there any abstentions on this one? So thank you very much. And of course, this recommendation does go to the council. I'm sure they're aware of that. We're ready for item number 4, which is a request from Bridge District 2 for review and approval of property located at 720 and 730 East 2nd Street.
Chair, members of the board, Jason Van Essen, State Planning staff. I'll show a few maps. This is the subject property along Robert D. Ray Drive in the kind of the northern part of the East Village. south of 235 Bridge District. Over the last few years, you've seen site plans and plats for the phase 1. We've seen phase 2 and phase 3 come in. We do have a proposed revision, and so that's why we're back. Even late last year, we already approved work in this highlighted area. We did do response or notice, didn't get any responses. Get it to fit on the screen well, I'm going to go ahead and leave north at the right-hand side of the screen. And just as far as layout goes, this is the plat, so you can see that it's parcels, postage stamp parcel for each building, and then an outlot. The switching in the footprints and the addition of one unit really is as a result of an easement that runs through here. Originally, the thought was this easement could be amended, and the buildings that you saw a few months ago were actually closer to the street. That's not gone anywhere, so the proposal is to shift the buildings to accommodate that sewer easement that runs through there. And in the process of doing that, they've made some adjustments to the unit type mix. So that's allowed them to end up with 50 units instead of 49. Landscaping plan, very similar to what you saw before. In the staff report, we have a few comments about landscaping. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. That's the actual site plan and plat are pretty straightforward, and there's some things that we can work out with them. The other part of the request is really what I think we should focus on tonight, and that's a change in building materials from what was previously approved. This is phase 1. Looking down, this is the river, Robert D. Ray Drive. And you can see the mix, highly successful project, and the mix of materials, which included brick, full dimension, full depth brick. When this came through late last year, the design was proposed to continue on. And I have this kind of conceptual drawing. As part of this resubmittal and changing with the plat, the applicant is hoping to open the discussion back up again with regard to the masonry material. And what they're proposing to do is replace the units that you see in the purple would be the brick, where the brick would have been, that would come off and be replaced with a adhered stone product. I'm going to let the applicant kind of walk you through the details of why they are proposing this change, how they're hoping to accomplish some of the same depth, the creation of depth with the material. It's a thinner material. They are doing a few things to try to get it to be have a similar relief as a brick. Brick is a little over 3 inches, 3.5 inches in depth. For instance, at a window, the window is going to come out a little bit, so you might have about 3 inches of relief. The product, the way they've laid it out, that would come back down to 1 3/4 as far as that depth. I'll let them walk you through that. Just quickly, I showed you the picture of phase 1. This is a drawing version of you can see up here, this is the building grouping as part of this last phase they're reviewing tonight. So Robert D. Ray. But this is what it looked like with the brick concept. So the brick is the dark material. This is with the stone rendered out. And you can kind of see the stone material here, and just the backside buildings. So instead of this would currently is brick, so that would be swapped to stone, and then so forth. I think I'll let the developer team show you some images and talk through their detailing. In the staff report, unfortunately, when this went out, we hadn't had enough time to really fully digest this and kind of bring everybody together that we felt needed to be a part of the process on our end of providing input. And so we actually put out a staff report to you that said we provide a recommendation at the meeting tonight regarding the material. I have already visited with the applicant team, so we've had the conversation. So they are aware that as staff, we are recommending that they stay with brick. We think that that would be the best way to move the project forward. And the reason for that, this development was created to be kind of have a uniform appearance. And if I could go back to this graphic, this shows phase 1, phase 2, and 3. And all of the townhomes is essentially a single design throughout the development, same height. There's some subtle nuances. Some of the footprints are a little different, so they have some units that are smaller than others. There's some of them that have more space on the 3rd floor than others. But they're essentially the same building. So it's a development that was intended to have a uniform appearance. This is different than like Gray Station, which we saw from Hubble recently, where there's half a dozen or more different building types of different heights. And so we felt that we understood that in a neighborhood that has kind of a more organic mix of building types, that it's okay or it makes sense that there might be different building materials to go along with that. In this case, it's kind of monolithic or kind of a mono design. And so we believe that the best way to move the project forward to ensure the quality of what they've built currently is to continue on with the brick appearance. That's the crux of our recommendation to you. There's other subtle nuances. I've already mentioned the differences in depth between brick and the material that they're proposing with regard to the relief that you're going to get visually, that I think really does a nice job of breaking up the facades of the buildings that we've seen built so far. So I will just make sure we're all on the same page. I will show you the conditions of approval that we are suggesting with regard to the plat and the site plan. So review and approval. Okay, here we go. Compliance with all administrative review comments, standard condition. Review and approval of the finalized building elevations and materials by the planning administrator. Since we have been communicating with them with regard to this change, we don't have the finalized building elevations for each unit. So that's really where condition number 2 would come in. If you did approve the change, then obviously we would need to continue to work with them. So you would still need to adopt condition number 2, regardless of how you feel about the siding material. 3 is review and approval of the finalized landscaping plan by staff. Like I said, there's a few nuances that we'd like to work with them on. Not a big deal. Just making sure we have consistency in the plantings throughout the development. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These are all standard conditions that you see on pretty much every site plan, at least ones in the downtown. LED light fixtures for the street light, rooftop mechanical equipment being screened, placement of utility meters and other utilities, overhead service lines. Section 42 is the tree removal and mitigation ordinance. So those are those conditions. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Jason, from time to time, people propose thin brick. This is not thin brick as built now.
That's correct.
That's the real deal.
Full dimension.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason? All right, seeing none, is the applicant present?
I didn't know you had this.
Oh, okay.
So, Dan Drendel, Slingshot Architecture, 305 East Court Avenue in Des Moines, and here on behalf of Bridge District 2 LLC. Yeah, when we were looking, we had intended to come with, full staff support today, and as Jason described, when the final report came out today, didn't the approval of the switch of masonry materials wasn't recommended. So so far we've been we brought the idea of a different materiality to staff a couple months back, and we talked about some concerns about depth and detailing, like we were talking about. One of the things we started working through was really how the material would be installed. This is at a window jamb, for instance. Could be pushed out with outboard insulation to get to similar depths of masonry, full masonry brick. But then at openings, that depth, if it's a thinner material, can kind of reveal itself. So we worked through that and are proposing a flashing detail to really extend the depth of those openings to be comparable to masonry product. So right now what we submitted was at 2 inches. We can actually increase that if that's really a sticking point. From Jason and my discussions, wasn't necessarily that that's the sticking point, but we could really match the depth visually of a full masonry unit. Our first proposal here, or our I guess our switching of materials, from our first meeting with staff, we all decided to take this pact to go down this path to replace the materials kind of one for one, dark masonry on dark masonry locations and lighter masonry on lighter masonry locations. And then today we were talking, we had a great discussion today. It was about, really that the desire is from staff is to make the continuity really go through the whole development. So I guess as we're looking at changing the material, our pitch is really to just blend the right amount of difference or continuity within the urban space and the neighborhood texture. So kind of treating that phase 2 as a variation of the neighborhood. So what we'd ask from you tonight, and I'll give you just a couple more kind of explanations, and I'll show you the material. What we'd love to do, it's really critical that we keep the site plan moving forward. So that's really critical to our process. So approval of that. But we'd love to continue working with staff and get your approval tonight to continue the switching of materials conversation. So if, from your perspective, if you can approve the use of the alternate masonry product and to go into further discussion with staff about, maybe it's not actually the dark masonry where the dark masonry goes, or we switch around the materials the right way to get enough differentiation so it's not, a near differentiation that feels strange in the neighborhood, where it's actually another layer to the urban fabric and another piece of the neighborhood that's slightly different. That's kind of how we did 555, which is another successful development of townhomes for rent down on Southwest 7th. Similar process. We used the same materials, but we used them in different ways, if you remember that one when it got approved. So I do have what we're proposing today. So we would be flexible in coloration. Warranties really keep up with brick. The adhered stone will be durable. We work through the base conditions too, which I can show you that too. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, one of the things that happens sometimes if you use an adhered stone product, it also kind of reveals itself at the base of the building because you can't bury it. So we'll extend the concrete ledge out, but the masonry is actually still sitting on that base, so it's not overhanging the structural base. That was the other part from our earlier conversation. Yeah. You can see under the masonry here and here, the concrete's actually going to be brought out of plane so that the masonry feels like it's sitting on that, which isn't necessarily structurally required for adhered stone. So we're looking to pay attention to those material differences, but in response to the comments that we got from staff today, we would just look to continue figuring out how to either put the right amount of difference or continuity into this plan. So we'd appreciate your support of switching the materials and definitely in keeping the site plan going. And we can cover the depth to match the masonry if that's needed, or the brick depths if that's needed. Any questions that I can address?
What's the impetus for switching the material? Is it just cost?
It wasn't just cost. There's also just construction timelines. Masons that install the full masonry are not as available as the geared stone product. And we have about 60 or 70 left to build.
That was a great question, too. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the project? Seeing none, is there anyone who has questions or concerns about the project? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And generally, this is a time where you would rebut anything, but there hasn't been any comments. So, Commission, what is your pleasure?
I move we accept staff recommendation in its entirety.
I guess, Mike?
It would be with the addition
Right.
that we're not recommending change in materials.
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure you were good with that. Did you have a question, Greg, about that? Okay, so the motion is to approve Part A, which is approval of the submitted preliminary plat in compliance with all administrative review comments of the city permit and development center. B, the recommendation of the staff was to, number one, be compliant with all administrative review comments of the city's permit and development center. Number two was a review and approval of the finalized building elevations and materials, as Jason has outlined their recommendation tonight, and review and approval of the finalized landscape plan by the planning administrator.
So just to clarify, that is no change in the approved building materials from what exists.
The number two is no change in material. Okay. And then number four is the provision of the LED street light fixtures and black metal poles. Number five is all rooftop mechanical equipment shall be screened with material that is architecturally compatible with the building to the satisfaction of the planning administrator. Number six is all utility meters, transformers, ground-mounted equipment, and other utilities shall be placed along the rear or side facades that are internal to the site. 7 is all service lines to the building and all utility lines in the adjoining right-of-way shall be located underground. And 8 is compliance with Section 42-550 of the City Code. So that's the motion. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All right, is there any opposition?
I didn't have any problem with the site plan, but I could go with the other material.
There's one, you got the recuse. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you raised your hand. So let's see. We've got the approval, the recruit, recuse, abstention. And I should ask in the objection.
911.
Easy to remember. Ready for item number 5. This is a request from Bell Avenue Properties for property located at 6230 Scout Trail.
Just give me a second here to get Dan's.
Yeah. Well, he's still here.
Oh.
Right. Yeah, we're good.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Esten, city planning staff. The aerial identifies the subject property, 63rd, Southwest 63rd, Southwest McKinley. This was before you in 2018 for rezoning. Ultimately went on to the city council and they approved the rezoning subject to conditions on July 9th, 2018. Just quickly, I'll read through the conditions. Overhead doors shall not face Highway 28 or any residential development property unless screened by another building or by either berms and landscaping material. Provision of landscaping in accordance with the city's standards for C2 districts. No portion of the property within 50 feet of the public right-of-way or adjoining residentially zoned property may be used for outside storage of materials, trailers, or equipment. Any area used for the outside storage of materials or equipment shall be paved and screened from public street views and residential development by architectural screening panel systems or fencing / landscaping as approved by the commission or planning administrator. The public street facades of any building or portion thereof located within the property, which is not blocked from view by other structures or landscaping, shall be constructed using exterior materials that are predominantly glass, brick, masonry, architectural steel panels, other durable materials. No exterior insulation of finished systems, EFIS, shall be used below an elevation of 6 feet above grade, and compliance with all recommendations of the traffic study as part of any submitted subdivision or site plan. And then there was one left. Any site plan for development shall be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's kind of a nice segue. I mean, it was a condition that this come back to you. This would typically be an administrative reviewed site plan. But given the concerns and how to move the project forward, the council thought it was appropriate to send this back to you, have a public forum that people could participate in and see how the site plan is coming along. So in your packet, you were sent the submittal that we had as of last week, and let me find just a good sheet to land on. I think this might be as good as anything. So, building in the center, parking with some access off a Scout Trail to the north, realignment with outdoor vehicle storage areas around the building to the south and to the east. The berm, the stormwater facilities throughout the site, 3 of them. And I do want to show you the landscaping sheet because a lot of what our staff report centers around is really using landscaping and berming to shield views. You also were given, before I get into that sheet, I will show the building elevations. This was in your packet. So here's the west elevation towards 3rd. Above that, south elevation, east elevation, kind of more internal. And then at the top, the north elevation. Landscaping page. So in our staff report, we are recommending approval, and I'll just go ahead and show you the conditions. And I have some more drawings to show you, so just bear with me if it seems like I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think we're going to get to where we need to be here in a minute. So we are recommending approval. Number one is our standard compliance with all administrative review comments. Number two is the provision of a 10-foot trail and street tree scaping spaced every 30 feet along Highway 28 frontage of the property in furtherance of move DSM. Three is provision of architectural screening and opaque fence screening surrounding proposed outside storage area. And four is revision of the landscaping plan to increase landscaping or provide architectural screening in areas where staff has determined that the sight lines to the overhead doors and outside storage areas from public views and surrounding residential properties are not proposed to be adequately protected to meet the requirements of the zoning condition. So as planners, you know, we like paper still. We're not all electronic, and we put together, had some information from them and put together kind of our own analysis looking at their landscaping and burning. Hold on a second. And highlighted some areas where we had some concerns with their proposal. And so they submitted, as of this morning, we got a revised drawing set that works towards, they believe they're working towards achieving our staff recommended condition on landscaping and buffering. We have not had time to review this. I will go ahead and show it. I'll let them walk you through it. We would recommend that any action you take tonight to approve that you still adopt the staff recommendation condition language. That way we can go back and route this new plan, take the proper amount of time to review it and make sure that everything is, you know, what we believe is appropriate. But just to highlight, they did do some additional screening and changes some of the landscaping. This is the northern half with 63rd, this direction. Southern half, I'll let them go into greater detail, but they have adjusted some of the berming and some of the plant material locations and numbers. One of the things that we noticed that changed was they did add, there is this area here. They had originally proposed some material, and we'd suggested that some sort of screen wall here to fit the condition language. They have come back and are showing a screen wall, but they're not showing any landscaping around it. So that might be something that we would like to have further discussion with them on, whether that's tonight or at a later point. They did also submit with the information that we got today some renderings that show views of the property. Let's see here, zoom out with the proposed landscape material and I'm assuming this, you know, this accounts for grading on the site. I'll let them go into greater detail. The only thing I would add is just to manage expectations. I mean, this is, you know, mature sized screening material. So it's shown here. This is that back side parking lots. Front of the west side of the building. The perspective. I think from our end as staff, I believe that we can get resolution with all the items by continuing to work with the applicant if you adopt the staff rec. The one item though, excuse me, I shouldn't say all the items, but number two. The number two, whoops, excuse me. The city's transportation plan calls for a 10-foot wide trail and through the perimeter, the 63rd Street perimeter of this whole corridor. Just like sidewalks and other infrastructure facility improvements, when development comes in, we expect development to provide that. The applicant is asking for a deferral. They're not saying that they're not willing to do it, but they would like to have a indefinite deferral until the rest of the spine is constructed. As staff, we don't agree with that. We think it needs to come in when the development's done. It's really hard to track those things. You know, I think you're accustomed to hearing us talk about, you know, getting things in incrementally, whether that's a sidewalk in an area that doesn't have sidewalks, or it's a trail or some sort of street improvement. And so our recommendation is that goes in with the project when it's constructed, and that it not be left floating out there for the future. Happy to answer your questions.
Jason, what's the closest sidewalk development?
You know, I'm not sure of any distance to give you like a, you know, it's 1,000 feet or 500 feet. There's, you can see from the aerial that there's not much of a network in the area, but I would go back, you know, to how we review stuff is that change happens incrementally, and we have to accept that and just understand that sometimes things are going to go in ahead of when stuff around them goes in. That's our perspective.
Your knowledge, the scouts are there, Jason, going north. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they have a sidewalk on their property, Jason, 63rd Street?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question.
Any other questions for Jason?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, applicant present.
Good evening. I'm Guy Gast. I'm with the Waldinger Corporation, 2601 Bell Avenue. I'm representing Bell Avenue Properties and the Waldinger Corporation. We have
Craig Erickson, Chef Hattery, 4125 Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines.
Mike Anthony, Shive Hattery, 4125 Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines.
Vitus Baring, SVPA Architects, 1466 28th Street, West Des Moines.
So just a little background. When we came last summer, we really didn't have any plans. We had done what I'd call preliminary neighborhood meeting with some block diagrams to get some sense of what concerns neighbors had. And not surprisingly, they were parking lot lighting, noise, water flow, traffic, transportation, and then physically what they might see when they looked out their doors. Last week we had another meeting, and I'd say most all of the same concerns remain. And I think what we've tried to do as we've progressed through the building process, which has changed somewhat, we have added our corporate staff to the office portion of the building. We did that in October. So last week when we previewed elements of the building, which are the same things you see in your documents, we've tried to make sure that we're being sensitive to either the planning elements or the landscape elements or the requirements staff has put on us. I will make a comment for my part, at least, on the trail, to reaffirm what I think you heard. We're not opposed to the trail. A trail would be an amenity to our employees as well, but there is no plan. And right now there is no plan that we know of, no engineered solution that would get a trail from as far north as Valley Junction to wherever it might be going. I think I can have Shive or one of the folks comment on sidewalks. There's really no network of sidewalks or areaways for employees to traffic up and down. There are bike trails proximate, somewhat in the area, which we think are attractive, but really no trail network that's been designed. So our preference would be to defer the cost or construction, or to bond or appropriately ensure parties that we're still interested in it, but that we don't really want to construct it at this time. So that's to item 2 on the agenda. And Craig, would you like to address maybe the landscape?
While we're on that, I need to talk about, give them one topic.
So again, to build off what Guy said, Waldinger is in full support of the trail as well as the street trees. Obviously, it is an amenity as well as a benefit for their employees. This is taken out of the Move Des Moines, which was adopted in November of 2018, and as part of that, basically to to make the connectivity of the trail system, that line was drawn on the plan as late as November of 2018. Talking with Parks and Rec, there are no current plans in their capital improvement plans, nor in their dollars set aside as far as planning for this trail to be connected. It's going to require, an extension of the bridge over the Raccoon River, as well as, modifying properties all along that corridor. As a result of that, Waldinger, again, supports the trail, but respectfully requests to defer the construction until the location studies can be done on where it needs to go along that corridor, as well as engineering be completed. Waldinger would be willing to bond for the full amount of the construction as well as the street trees, so that at which time other parties start building that trail and the connectivity can be built, we'll get that taken care of.
Hi, Craig Erickson again. I just want to speak with you a little bit about some of the issues Jason raised relative to landscaping. We'll start with that plan. That presents sort of the overall picture of the landscaping. I'll pick these things off maybe one by one. Jason mentioned the screen fence, architectural screen fence, 10-foot screen fence there. So one of the comments we got back from staff was requiring a solid architectural screen there rather than landscaping. He talked about not adding landscaping there, and the zoning language actually was an or proposition. It said a screen fence or landscaping. When they asked us to do a screen fence in lieu of landscaping, the owner asked us to put that there. The one thing that's not being told in this picture is that there's an existing landscape easement on the property over here that's 50 foot wide. We went in there and counted existing trees. There's over 100 existing trees in that landscape easement that are over 12 inches of diameter or evergreen, along with numerous ones that are under that. So there's well over 100 trees on that existing property, or on their property, that will remain. We are actually proposing to expand that landscape buffer or that tree preservation area to 75 feet to preserve more of the trees that are actually off of the existing easement. So it's really not a true picture to say there's no landscaping being provided there. There's a large buffer between us and the existing property to the east. There are some areas up towards the north here where there will be some disturbance of that berm and the existing trees, and you can see in the planting plan we're replacing all of those trees. So that is being taken care of. Some other just comments about dealing with screening. I'm going to kind of go to some of these specific sheets. There was conversation about screening views from the neighbors up here. One of the things Waldinger does want to do is leave this area here for an open event lawn. If they have a company picnic, some other event, having ability, a place to have a pickup softball game, those kinds of things. So we are providing additional screening there, but right up close to the building and storage areas, pushing it as far south as we can to allow that area to continue to function as an amenity for the Waldinger employees and their guests. So we have addressed that. On this sheet, you see we've extended some screening here, which wasn't a staff comment, but we realized we needed to pick it up because there's the transformer and generator and a gas meter will be there, so that's fully screened from view to the public on 63rd Street. Moving south here, Guy mentioned the concerns that the neighbors have. We're certainly very sensitive to those. He also mentioned that, he had an additional meeting with the neighbors last week. There's already some plan changes that have come out of that. We've rearranged and added some plants in here relative to a neighbor's concern here. Also identified that there might be some concerns down here and added some plants here. I should explain this a little bit in that there are two levels of screening happening here on the south side. One is the required buffer screen here along the south edge. What you're seeing here are actually trees that are required as part of the public improvements documents for McKinley Avenue. There's 30-some required trees along here. We're actually providing more than that to help with screening of the neighbors. So, and there are some sections. We've actually cut some sections that show the visibility through those areas. They won't read well on screen. They are in your packet. If you have any questions, we can show. But essentially, we're showing that between these neighbors, not only do we have a distance of over 600 feet, but we've got 2 levels of screening there. In addition to that, we're really maxing out the berms that happen in there. So the berm that these trees sit on is generally 6 foot tall. There were some questions from the neighbors about the size of the trees at planting. I think the comment was, you know, what good does a 3-foot berm with a 3-foot tree on it do? Actually, all the trees provided will meet the city's landscape ordinance requirement, which is a minimum of an 1.5 inch caliper deciduous tree or 6 foot tall coniferous tree. A 1.5 inch to 2 inch caliper deciduous tree is a minimum of 8 to 12 feet tall, depending on the species. So the landscape buffer is going to go in day one with, you know, a 6 foot tall earthen berm with 6 foot tall evergreens, and then also 8 to 12 foot deciduous trees. Certainly the full impact of that won't be seen for a few years, but that's the case in any buffer yard requirement in any city. You know, anytime you deal with that, plant material needs to grow. But we are trying to get maximum effect, not only by doing the berming, but also putting quite a few shrubs along there that really fill in that view between the mass of the tree planting and the top of the berm. So there are quite a few shrubs. As a matter of fact, we are planting over 360 trees on site and over 450 shrubs, most of which are being used in some screening capacity. So, you know, the Whites, or the Waldinger company, really takes this issue seriously. The other thing that we've done here is we've substantially beefed up the planting here. There's concern about visibility of some overhead doors here from 63rd and also from this intersection. A question about doing an architectural screen fence there. With the proximity to the building and everything going on with the architecture of the building, we felt like it would actually be distracting to put some sort of fence there. And so we chose to dramatically up the number and density of evergreen plants there. We thought that would be a much more friendly space to present to 63rd Street than some sort of fence. We've also reconfigured this berm and made it taller to make the landscaping more effective in terms of screening there. There are a couple of views that are pretty much impossible to screen, and that's when you look straight up a driveway. That is always going to be the case whenever you have a landscape berm and either a street or a driveway that intersects that. At some point, you have to have a break there, but we've done the best we can to minimize those and screen around them. The final area I want to point out here was a requirement to provide screening from these neighbors down here. You're now talking distances well in excess of 1,000 feet. Like I said, there's quite a few existing trees down here. There's a question about adding trees down there. Based on the grade, it really was not going to be as effective. So what we did was we pushed the landscaping up the slope as close to the building as we can. We put those trees closer together and we added additional trees, once again, to deal with that comment. So per the staff report, we're happy to continue to work with staff on this item. I think you can tell by what we're showing here that we're very serious about coming to a resolution that meets those criteria and provides protection for the neighbors. And Waldinger Corporation wants to be a good neighbor here and have this project go forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vitus to talk to you about architecture.
All right, I'll try to keep this fairly brief and general in nature. The building is comprised of 3 main areas. There's a 2-story office building. Those areas are approximately 45,000 square foot floor plates, so about 90,000 square feet of corporate office. There's a production area that is primarily for the fabrication of sheet metal, plumbing, electrical components before they go out into the field. And then there's a 1-story production support area. So you're kind of seeing those different building areas highlighted in color here. I'll briefly go over a couple of the building elevations. We did meet with the neighborhood association or the neighborhood group last Wednesday, and they asked us to generate a few extra elevations or renderings, so we want to show those as well. And I don't know if you can zoom out a little bit there. So this is the north elevation. It's the primary entry. On the north side, there's a main entrance feature with a curtain wall that you're seeing. Up in this area is a boardroom and a second level patio feature, so that's what that notch out is. Building materials will be painted precast, black aluminum frame windows. There's kind of the main material palette in the office. This is starting to move around the northwest side, so again, the main entrance is here, and then you'll see on the west elevation, this would be the elevation facing 63rd Street. Again, we have another break in the precast material to provide a large aluminum curtain wall to provide some interest. That's where the employee cafe is on the first floor and the training center on the second floor. Just a real quick image, a little closer up to that secondary employee entrance that's going into the cafe and the training center on the west elevation. As we move further south, you'll see here, this is where it steps down to a single-story building. That will be an architectural metal aluminum composite panel in a two-tone variation that wraps around that single story. This is a little bit closer up view of the production patio. And again, that sort of slight variation in the metal panel. Be somewhat similar to what you see down on the new Hilton in downtown with those orange and rust colors, that metal panel system. It's very similar to that. Now, the additional renderings that we've put together to try to better convey the south and east sides. This is looking from that southwest side, and we've tried to kind of keep up with the changes in the landscape this week as best we can. Again, a large amount of trees on the berm that's directly south, and some increased screening here off to the southwest corner. Again, that's that single-story production area and the main warehouse production zone. This is an aerial from the south. We did do some studies from down at the property line, and all you see is trees. So it would be a rendering of fake trees. So we brought the camera up to really show a sense of the berm landscape, so you could actually see what's on the south side of the building. So this is obviously an elevated perspective. This is actually one of those renderings that is from kind of basically down about, looking in from about here, showing the new roadway, the trees that are as part of the public roadway improvement, and then the other layer of trees beyond. And then finally, a view from the east, northeast. Again, this would be the two-story office that faces north. Did try to focus a majority of the overhead doors to the east, wanting to keep those off of you from 63rd. With that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Questions for applicant's team? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll ask at this time if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of the project. Seeing none, are there those that have concerns or questions that would like to speak now?
I'm Dan Johansson, 2801 42nd Street. I'm here representing the Street Collective of Greater Des Moines. We as a group have done a lot of work over the past few years working with everyone in the community really to put together a good, solid transportation plan for people moving about the city in ways other than in a car. So when I hear comments about all these lines here, can I try this thing? How to do it. Anyway, so these are the lines on the paper that they're talking about, but it means a lot more to those of us who've been involved in the development of this. This is a way to get over 90% of the people in Des Moines close enough to a network to be able to have transportation options other than owning their own personal car. And you can see on the plan, there is an intention to have a 10-foot trail along 63rd there. But I'm here to speak in support of the staff recommendation of avoiding a deferral on it. There were a couple things in the discussion I'd like to point out. And in West Des Moines, right across the city boundary, there is a trail right along Veterans Parkway that comes right up to the property on the other side of 63rd. So to say there's no sidewalk nearby is within 20 feet of it. Another thing to point out is there is already some connectivity to the Great Western Trail here. There's a road that is bikeable. It's actually closed to vehicular traffic now, I think, last time I biked by there. And another thing to point out is there are apartment complexes on this side of the river. Well, on the side of the river near the proposed development that would be, if people work for Waldinger and live there, they would be able to get to work on a trail. And the whole concern about how do you get the trail across the river is not even relevant. Another point is there's park in the plan, and that is even closer. So the network connectivity is not so far in the future if you really look at the plan and what's being done around it. The last point is this is a plan the city has approved. The city is intending to move forward it, and the way to do that is when these seemingly kind of small decisions come before the city, and to do nothing is to make no progress towards this plan that is agreed on, and a lot of us are looking forward.
I just want to clarify, you're in support of the applicants.
In support of the city staff's recommendation to put the 10-foot trail in when the development is done and avoid the deferral that's being asked for.
Okay. Thank you. All right, at this time, is there anyone who would be opposing the plan?
This is an old rendition here. Chairperson Easley and Commission members, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is George Davis, and I represent the Southwestern Hills Neighborhood Association. We've been involved with this project for, well, ever since the first initial meeting, which was back in June. We have some concerns moving forward. One of the concerns we had is, well, as a neighborhood association, we're concerned that all development is positive within the neighborhood, and everyone would get something out of each development, whether it's the Cruz housing development, which is in that area, the potential Mike Knapp development, which is in that area, the Waldinger development, and also the neighbors that are in the area. So what we're trying to do is find a happy medium for everyone in the area and make it also a positive tax base for Des Moines. So moving forward with that, I think the concerns that we have, especially with Waldinger, is they haven't met with the neighborhood until an emergency meeting was called. On Friday, we were notified about a meeting on a Tuesday or Wednesday. This was last week. And then there were some additions to this morning that we are not aware of. So the neighbors and other development areas have not had time to digest their proposal at this time. We're not saying that we're against what they have proposed, but we just haven't had time to even look at it. Moving forward, the street development here, as you can see, this is the old Southwest Connector, which was proposed going through there. And then this here is the reconstruction, because the Southwest Connector idea was abandoned by council. And this here is, this line that I drew here is going to be the reconstruction of McKinley Avenue. Now, if you're not familiar with the area, it's hard to pick that up. I will say that the street improvements or the street redevelopment on Southwest McKinley was based on a traffic study that was done in May 2018. Well, since that traffic study, that's when it was approved. So it was done previous to even May of 2018, and that was based on the Southwest Connector going through. Well, with that being abandoned, what we have is we have an asterisk in the plan of Plan A, Plan B on development on McKinley if the Southwest Connector is disapproved. So that is not really clear as the way that is going to be developed. Now, it has been put together, but we do feel that that really impedes the neighbors which are along this area right here. There's 5 neighbors there, and that impedes their, development because we're reconfiguring that whole street along there. On the Waldinger side, regarding the streets, I do support the concern of Waldinger putting a 10-foot multi-trail moving down Highway 28 or 63rd Street. When, if you look over here, you connect to the Great Western Bike Trail right down McKinley Avenue right there. So here we are trying to develop something in the future down 63rd that might not happen for 15 or 16 or 20 years, when the immediate impact would be the Great Western Trail, which I pointed out right there. So we feel that McKinley Avenue has to be reconstructed and redeveloped moving forward, because a current traffic study should be proposed or reviewed, and that's some of the concerns that the neighbors have. Another concern that we have, but that we just found out about tonight, that is the recreational area that Waldinger is proposing. Is that going to be any type of development, or is it just going to be open land and with not screening, or a reason to not screen that area because it's going to be considered a recreation area? We have several speakers here tonight that have a lot more defined graphics, and so I will give up my time to let the neighbors and other businesses speak. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you for allowing me to speak.
All right, other speakers against the plan? I think you just did.
My name is Mike Knapp. I live at 5935 Southwest McKinley, and I'm a neighbor to the east. I did sign in. I hate for me to be characterized as somebody speaking against the development, because I'm not against the development, never have been against the development. I think it's a wonderful thing for Des Moines to keep Waldinger here. They're a great company. I do have specific concerns about the actual execution of the project, and I'll try to touch on them. It is, as Guy did say, it's been sight, it's been sound, it's been lighting, and for me, an additional with water runoff. I received some information earlier from city staff that identified, start with water runoff. I know that there is a drain each way that is natural that goes into a lake that was built on my property in 1975. About a 10-acre pond. It's wonderful. Great fishing, by the way. The change in the acreage that will be draining into the pond, I think, was estimated by staff at being 2.5 acres, and that may have come from Shive Hattery or from staff. I'm not sure with whom. I did talk to my engineer, Jerry Oliver, and hired him to kind of do a study. And he identified about another 3.5 acres above that he believes are being drained into the pond. So there's a pretty substantial difference in, I think, what staff and engineers have said. My hydraulics is limited to siphoning gas out of a car into a lawnmower. So I don't understand this stuff, but it does concern me. The lake on our property is a wonderful asset. We've enjoyed it for almost 50 years. So I would not want that to be disturbed. The change from an alfalfa field to a parking lot, I know is going to happen. I know things are going to change. I just would like to be assured that people do know what the change is. What I heard from staff was that when it was the 2.5 acres, it represented about a 9% change, and they said that didn't raise a red flag. But if there, in fact, is another 3.5 acres, that makes it maybe 20%. And I just don't know when the red flag goes up, and I would like to better understand that before the plan is adopted. The second part is that the ponds that are being put in, and Guys explained them very well to me, and I I think it's appropriate, and I think it will be an asset, even to my property. The difficulty is the method by which they're being put in. There is, as was mentioned, a berm easement that I was granted probably 20 years ago, and that was when the zoning was changed to commercial. It's 50 feet by 100 feet, and then it just wraps on around beyond that. That's actually on property I own entirely. We hired Ted Lair to landscape it. The trees that you guys have measured are all the trees that we planted. They came in at anywhere from 8 to 14 feet with pine trees that were brought in by spades. Some pretty nice large deciduous trees. Unfortunately, they're emerald oaks, and it cost me about $7,500 every 2 years to treat them, but I'm trying to save them. In putting in the pond, as Waldinger is proposing, they are going to tear the berm down, which happens to be the portion that is exactly in the sight line from my front door to their storage facility. They're probably, I don't know, they're identified, and I've got a bring it up here. I took a picture off my front door toward what would be the storage facility. And it's a clear shot. You take the trees out, and no matter what you plant in there, there's going to be a pretty open view. I'm not I think, and had I been involved, what I would have suggested is that rather than tearing the berm down and replanting it, would it not be possible to abandon the pipe that is there, just block it off, maybe move off to the side 20 feet and bore it through so that the trees and the elevations, you know, the stuff that I've been growing for 20 years could stay and continue to be a part of the buffer. And I'm sure mechanically it can be done. I don't know the cost. I know that sewer lines are bored under streets all the time. So I wonder if that might be an alternative to tearing down the berm. And I would say further, I have reviewed the berm agreement. I've talked to the attorneys that drew it up. And quite honestly, it is their opinion that Waldinger doesn't have a right to put a spade of dirt out of it. And it goes through a mediation process where you get the head of the law school at Drake to select an arbiter and go through that. And I'm very I'm protective of my family. I'm protective of my dogs and my berm. It's kind of it's an important component of the lifestyle that we have. So
technically, your time is up. So if you can kind of summarize.
Okay, so I'm concerned about the water, the berm. I think there's a way to accomplish it. The wall, we started out with a double row of 6-foot pines, which I will tell you what, that may hit somebody's minimum standard. It is far below what I consider to be a reasonable standard when you talk about an architectural barrier or fencing and landscaping. And I think this has been beefed up, and you've talked about a 10-foot fence. I don't know the nature of the 10-foot fence. I don't know the height of the storage that occurs on the other side of the fence. I'd like to understand that trailers and storage facilities are hidden from sight. I've been around job trailers and stuff. They're not really attractive. I did, just for the sake of argument, we started out with 2 rows of 6-foot pines. So I had my wife photograph a wall that is between a commercial enterprise and a residential one where we live. And I'll tell you what, that's a concrete block wall with lick and stick stone on the outside of it. It is a relatively, actually inexpensive wall. A lot higher price, obviously, than 2 rows of pine trees.
Mr. Knapp,
But-
this isn't feeling like a summary.
I'm sorry.
I'm Dave Dinsdale,
Yeah.
61.
It still would be good if you could summarize them, Mr. Knapp.
I just think, something the nature of a wall like that, and I don't know the nature of the wall that they're proposing, but something that would be, have some appeal and appearance, would act as a sound barrier and a visual barrier. So I guess I'm concerned about the water, I'm concerned about the berm and the wall. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Van Patten. I'm at 6020 Southwest McKinley Avenue, and I wasn't able to prepare a lot of stuff because things were brought in this morning that we found out last week. And one of them, and that's why I was first brought up about having an extension, because one of it is the roadway in front of my house is going to disappear, I found out last week. And then, I got a drain that goes underneath that street. I hired Jerry Oliver also to look at it. I also have a concern on the berms because when you look out my window, and I was doing this on the first set and I had a 3D put up there, and this is when it was like a 4-foot berm without any trees, really showing in there to show kind of like, sorry, wrong way, there we go. And that's looking out at my house there. Chad Alley is at 6116, who just had to leave because of family issues. This is in front of his house looking out. And I know those have changed, and they said they've had another 2 feet, the berms, and there's trees. And I see all that, but also on the issue with the trees, a lot of the trees that they're showing, there are a lot of leaf trees, there's some shrub trees, but in the wintertime, those leaves are going to be dropped down, and I'm going to be sitting there staring at a building, even with some of the shrubs up and everything, so I won't have any block or barrier or anything else. And they show on other parts of the property, they're showing shrubs being up there, like blocking on the one side, as I'm seeing, rows of high shrubs, and then on the back side, so it's blocking from the 63rd looking in and so forth. I'm not against this project. I was wanting to embrace it also. I thought through this whole process that we had when we were in here, the last time we were talking about that we'd have a neighborhood talks and go through the process, a neighborhood agreement on that. And it wasn't really addressed to that issue until when we had this extension. We brought up we hadn't heard anything from Waldinger, and that's when it was said everything came all at once at us and what was doing all these changes and so forth. I'm lost here because I have questions that are not being answered here tonight, that it's happening in front of my property and my house. I have where my driveway's being extended out, but I have a road with 3 other houses. I got where water comes down, it goes underneath the street. A drain has been there way before. It's a big drain. It was put in by the county and so forth, I believe. And so these are a lot of questions that, I'm concerned about. Who's going to own that land? I mean, why do we have to do that? And then going on with the road, there's a lot of questions that have been answered about it's going into a smaller road. There is going to be congestion coming in. With the road study that was prior to everything was really getting going, as we mentioned, there's traffic going out on the other way on Scout Trail, but there's no stoplights, so you're going to have where people get out going one way, but they're going to have to wait to go on other during high traffic periods and everything. Nobody's addressed that issue. How are you going to do that? Because people coming from the east side, they're going to be going up through 56, which is several different ways to get up there. The roads aren't adequate. It's just blacktop over gravel and so forth at one part, and then McKinley, which is not. We have a lot of bicycles, we were saying, on this trail. And it connects over to the other trail on the other side of West Des Moines. With the view looking out my window there in the elevations, Jerry, what did you show there on the height that you weren't able to go? Okay. And we'll be getting that too, because it's going out looking out where the height of my house goes in, looking out, like I said, is higher than what is being perceived, which they said is based on a 6-foot person on the street looking out up, which my house, like I said, is higher up with the windows looking out, looking over. So there's just a lot of questions that haven't been really answered all at the last minute here with us. So I feel as a neighborhood, we need to have some more time to digest instead of really progressing forward, even though city staff has recommended on some of these that they would do and so forth. So anyway, I'm done right now myself. Oh, is there any questions?
Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve Utterson, 5884 McKinley. The one concern I have is the intersection, since we want to reconfigure the McKinley, that as you come down the Veterans Parkway, you're going to find that up here you can just go on down the road and around, which, as Nick had just pointed out, that the roads are inadequate, blacktop over gravel. They're already falling apart. McKinley was just resurfaced 2 years ago. And the only way out of there is 56th, which is really falling apart now. Need to get that resurfaced. The other is the bicycles, the trail system. I didn't know anything about this proposed trail system. That is, we get hundreds of bicycles coming down McKinley every summer. They cross over and join onto the. Oh yeah, lots of bike. Kind of neat. The other is, the concerns with the abortion of the McKinley part in front of Nick's houses and the other 3 or 4. How's that supposed to transition, or who takes care of the properties, whatever. I think table this or extend it. Check into these other questions we have. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
I wasn't going to speak, but I am. My name is Deb Whitehead, and I live at 6000 McKinley. I am opposed to this only for the fact that, and I'm not saying anything bad about you guys, all of the traffic that goes down our street, there is a lot of people that walk on our street. I am one of them because I had a brain aneurysm last year, and without any trails, without any sidewalks on our street, and there isn't any sidewalks, those of us who walk up and down our street, we are not going to be able to walk up and down our street without any sidewalks. And with all that added traffic, we are going to be in trouble without sidewalks. And I have to walk. That is a commandment, I should say, by my doctor, that I walk, or I am going to end up in the hospital or in a nursing home if I don't keep my blood pressure down and I don't exercise. Because if my blood pressure goes back up, that aneurysm that I have in my brain is going to burst. So I have to be able to walk. And with all that added traffic down our street, I'm not going to be able to. So therefore, the people like me, the people like other people down our street that have to walk, and the bicyclists, where are we supposed to go? Do we have to leave our street and go to malls or go to the trails? That isn't fair to us. There's hundreds of bicycles that when it gets 20 degrees or above, they go down our street like crazy, unless it's pure ice. So I think there needs to be a solution other than what is proposed here. Does anybody have any questions?
See that? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition to the plan? One more time, anyone else? All right, so Mr. Gass, this is your opportunity to perhaps answer some of the concerns and questions that have been brought forward.
Well, there are a lot of them, I guess. The couple of things we probably didn't illustrate very clearly, but on the south side, and remember some of the McKinley work, I'll be quite frank, we would have loved to have just come into the project, into the drive, entering the building, and kind of left McKinley alone. But the reality is that city's traffic and safety staff weren't comfortable with that fairly abrupt tie into old McKinley from what was to be the Parkway. So we've been tasked to do the public improvements to improve that street. And as a result of that, we have added, there is a sidewalk. Now, granted, it's on the developer side, that'd be our side of the street, that runs all the way from essentially 63rd to the property line. So, well, that won't be as convenient because you'd have to cross McKinley to walk on that sidewalk. There is a sidewalk on the entire south property line. It doesn't go anywhere, admittedly, because there's nothing to connect it to, either going east on McKinley. We tend to agree with the neighbors, and we have to be hopeful on our part about the Move Des Moines plan and the future improvements of 56th, which is a difficult street. We aren't going to encourage any of our trucks and delivery people to take 56th up toward color converting and a 15-mile-an-hour curve on a poorly developed road. But that's really not our challenge. Move Des Moines and the property or the development of roadways east of our property is probably the city's domain. On the water, I'll let Mike address the water flow. We're not against the trails, and I want to be sure the message was clear. We've been in Des Moines 113 years. We're not going to avoid our obligations in the future. It just doesn't make sense to us to spend what is not a small amount of money. It's a lot of money to build and landscape a trail that goes nowhere when we're making a fairly significant investment and every day adding to that investment in order to try and accommodate what we think is the most important stuff, which is how we landscape the site for the neighbor's benefit, not how we build a trail that isn't serviced by other connecting points. I'll let Mike address the water flow because I think that's important too.
Yeah, just to build on that, there, like Guy said, there is a 5-foot sidewalk along the whole northern side of McKinley, and that will connect to Southwest 63rd and have access across the street to the West Des Moines portion of the trail. In order to addressing some of the water that Mike brought up, with any development, there's an increase in volume. We are meeting all the regulations, actually exceeding the regulations of the city of Des Moines. The volume increase, quite frankly, to Knapp's Pond as a result of our development is 202%. And that's because you're converting pervious area to impervious area. That's the reason why we construct detention ponds. That's the reason why we have the water quality standard. And we're, like I said, meeting or exceeding those requirements. There's a 69% decrease in the flow rate coming towards Mike Knapp's Pond in the 100-year storm. So, obviously, as a development occurs, we have to release the water at a 5-year pre-developed rate, whereas previously, if a 100-year storm fell on that property, it would go onto the other property immediately with no detention time. And then, furthermore, our allowable release rate to Mike Knapp's Pond is 26.78 CFS based off the existing conditions. We are only going to be releasing 13.64 CFS, so that's a 49% reduction or even lower than what we're allowed to send towards this pond now. Additionally, we're meeting all the water qualities as well as with that extended detention time. Quite frankly, he has the best suspended solids in order to allow that sediment to settle out in the detention ponds that are on Waldinger's property, as well as the water quality piece, which should protect your pond for the future, as well as make water quality even better than it was before with settling that dirt and that sediment out of that rainwater. And then just I appreciate I don't want to point out a line on the paper and disregard that line. I appreciate what staff has done, city staff has done, as well as the collective in creating a trail network. George brings up a good point, and that's, I think, what we're trying to talk about here is the connectivity and what makes the most sense. Is there a connection down McKinley that makes more sense as far as, having that direct connection to the Great Western Trail? Again, like Guy said, Waldinger is in full support of the trail and wants the trail as an amenity and benefit. It just wishes to defer and put up a bond for the construction cost of that trail when that momentum picks up and that trail starts getting installed, rather than being the first one on the block and again it goes to nowhere. So thank you very much.
So I'd just like to weigh in on a couple other questions were asked. The question about the fence material, it's going to be an architectural, and this is the screen fence for the outdoor storage area that I'm speaking of. Mr. Knapp asked about what that's going to be. It's going to be an architectural metal panel that's per the recommendation of staff. That will be essentially an expression of the building or influenced by the building. We'll be working on the detail of that with staff. So your approval tonight here is basically saying we approve the site plan, and per the conditions, we would continue to work with staff to find a fence design that is acceptable to them and safeguards the neighbors. So it's not our intent to shirk that in any way. There was a comment about the open lawn area that I said might host an occasional event being interpreted as a recreation space. That's not the intent at all. We're talking about once or twice a year having some sort of picnic out there. This is not a neighborhood recreation center. There's no impacts to the neighbors. You'd be talking about a Saturday afternoon having family picnic, and the worst thing that's going to happen there is, some families and kids might be enjoying themselves. This is not a recreation area. No need for screening that. And I think Mike adequately covered the drainage area. I guess the one thing I would ask Mike Anthony to speak to is what we need to do to get the engineering solution to provide an appropriate outlet for our ponds that impacts that berm. There was a question about whether we can leave the berms in place and bore under them, and I'd just like him to speak to the engineering realities.
Yeah, it's a difficult solution. We could definitely look further into possibly boring, but the way that the ground is, the topography is in that area, it basically creates, spots that will hold water against the berm. So it was twofold as far as putting that pipe in, well, threefold. Number one was to install the pipe, and then, it has to go through the berm and enter in the same position as it was before as far as where the watershed goes. Number two was to fix those low spots, so that we had positive drainage and we didn't have, a sitting full of water situation. And I just lost my train of thought on the third one, but the emergency overflow for the detention pond. So, we're basically grading a small swale right over the top of that existing pipe. So that way, if the pond would ever, in a catastrophic rainfall event, ever fill up, that it would have a way to get out and exit the property. So we tried to look at it different ways. We've minimized the grading immensely in that area as a result of trying to figure out how we could grade the area appropriately in order to make it drain without having to add a bunch of drains and additional things. But we can certainly take another look at whether or not a boring solution is an option. But at this point, it just wasn't, just based off the topography that's in that area and the challenges that exist trying to tie that pipe in.
I think the only item I was going to comment on, and Craig did mention it, is the screening of the storage yard area. The requirements that we were asked to meet was to provide an architectural screen panel system or fencing and landscaping. Our first recommendation was to use heavy landscaping around that storage yard area. Staff specifically asked us to do a metal screen fencing. So that's what we're proposing, and that will be a metallic fence that will be generally of the same character or color, a vertical appearance to the panels that I showed you on the production support area.
I just wanted to ask if did anybody have any questions. You got one, great, go ahead. Oh, okay. Mr. Gass, it sounds like most neighbors commented that, you've been a good neighbor and, for the most part of it. I just kind of need to, in my mind, understand about the last minute, trying to connect with the neighbors, the meeting at the last minute. What happened with that?
Well, let's back up. The meeting we're required to have took place, and when I say required, there's a requirement to hold a meeting, and we did that last summer. And based on some of the concerns we had, that was before, I think, the vote on the rezoning. The subsequent meeting is not a requirement. There were two other occasions when we tried to reach out. One was just simply to say, if you really would like to come by our facility to get a sense of what we do, we'll make that available. We had several come, including Ward Councilman Mandelbaum, to tour the facility and get a sense of what do we make and what does it look like when it comes out of here, and is it a noisy, offensive process? So we've tried to make those opportunities, and sometimes when you send those notes out, it's not that convenient. I mean, George, I know, is coaching all the time, so it's kind of hard for him to say, well, I can just drop by. I think the Dinsdales came by and stopped by one day and asked if they could get some information, and I think we sat down and went over renderings of the building and elevations to give them a brief snapshot, but we weren't done with public improvements. Frankly, we didn't have all of staff's input. So sharing preliminary documents is hard. We've only just completed, and in preparation for this meeting, only just been able to amend elevations and plantings. And so it's, as I told them last week when we met at the Scouts headquarters, kind of dangerous for us to give out preliminary drawings and have sort of bad info circulating. So the meeting last week, admittedly short notice, but our best attempt to give them the latest information on a voluntary basis, not to hide the P. We are tasked with meeting staff's comments. Our hope tonight is that what you're voting on is whether or not we've met staff's comments adequately.
Any other questions from commission? Right.
Questions. Sorry, I'm probably going to put my day hat on here a little bit. I just have a few questions listening to the folks that came up and spoke. First of all, was there any thought about in your conceptual designing to basically extend Scout Trail Road to the north, that's on the north side, and come into the property with all your trucks and stuff, as opposed to changing McKinley? And was that looked at, or did that not make sense?
Well, there are a couple challenges. If you look at the site plan, you'll see that we only bought a small piece of the Scouts land, so there's only a little bit of Scouts trail there to work with. The other is we kind of get quickly into that detention area. So shifting the focus of production delivery to the north in one instance would have required us to abandon $250,000 of manufacturing equipment that is oriented one way and not the other. So we did look at that, but we don't control that other piece of Scouts land to work on it. Also, we felt that we have two types of traffic. We have employees who work in the office building and come to park. And for the owner's sake, our preference was to for two reasons. One, the most energy efficient component of the building is to orient the building to the north or northeast. We decrease the solar load and the amount of solar shading required. So we also felt that the view line to the north or northeast for employees was best. So we've tried to maximize the amount of daylight for employees who work in the building. That's really what drove orientation. The other is that truck traffic, I wouldn't say we go any direction specifically. We'll go back to Park Avenue to go downtown. We'll go to 235 up 63rd to go east, west, or north. Wouldn't say we expect to go south very much, but that's probably what drove, trying to influence the vehicle traffic more in the north end and the truck traffic more into the south end.
Okay, thank you.
that piece as well as there's a topography issue there too. At the cul-de-sac of Scout Trail, it's a very steep slope up to our site, and then it falls down as you would curl that road back around to the north in order to have access, and it wouldn't be very conducive to putting a road through to connect to the production area.
Greg, one additional comment. They are meeting what our traffic department has requested for connections for the street. And if I recall, on the Southwest Connector, one of the reasons why that was eliminated from the transportation plan was that build out, it was expected to carry about 9,000 cars a day. And it just didn't cost out putting that kind of roadway in. So even at 9,000 cars a day, if every one of those elected to take McKinley, that's a local street capacity level of traffic. So not building that, it was assumed their traffic was going to be absorbed by the existing street network. So again, they've met what our traffic division has asked them to do.
Any other questions?
I think the only thing wasn't addressed, a few of the neighbors came up last second and really talked about concerns about the visual and, from their elevated windows and being able to see the building, and you guys really didn't talk about that. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, as a practical matter, I don't think we can I don't know that we could solve that very easily unless we dug a bigger hole in the ground or something to get the building hidden from all perspectives. We were asked by staff with minimizing the view of overhead doors, at least that's what was in the comments that were approved by City Council when it said come back, make sure you make all efforts. So we have minimized to the maximum we can any doors in the south side of the building. That one of those is an electrical, one is a mechanical sort of entrance. The major loadout is on the east face, and that's a recessed truck well. So we've tried to keep head heights and doors low. I don't know the requirements specifically for what it would in this case be C2 facing residential, but I think that the berm heights and the tree planting heights we're using exceed the standard. And so we're trying to, do as much as we can with the land God gave us. I mean, we can't get it to be too much higher because there's stuff in the way.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and commission. Your pleasure.
Let me quickly speak in favor of the not waiving the requirement for the bike or for the 10-foot trail. In the past we have, when we've been in a industrial area, there's no connectivity with sidewalks. We've said, well, it doesn't make much sense to build a sidewalk there. Here, I don't think that's the case at all. I think that again, there's a trail that goes up Veterans Parkway, a number of trails nearby. A lot of people mentioned all the bicycling that goes on. And so it feels like it's continuing something that we have, even though it doesn't take it the whole way, right? And there's also benefit if you're biking on a road like that one. There's benefit to being off the road for a certain amount of time, right? So even if you can't be on the trail the whole way, there's certainly use in a short trail. And so I guess I worry that if we make exceptions or we say, well, nobody has to build until there's a network there, right? Then there'll never be a network there because so I think that we need to just stick to what staff has said there. I think it makes sense to get it started, and eventually we'll have a wonderful trail.
Francis?
I'm going to take a contrarian view. As someone who's experienced trails across the state, I find that trails that are adjacent to busy highways are very seldom used. A perfect example is a diagonal that runs from Des Moines to up to Marshalltown. You'll see there's a trail there, and it's very seldom used by bikers or walkers, simply because it's adjacent to heavily trafficked highway. The speed limit, I think, on that 63rd Street is, I think, either 45 or 50. And I think realistically, that's the minimum. I think it'd be very dangerous for any people walking to cross that road going from west to east, 63rd, to catch the sidewalk. And I think I'm cognizant of it. I encourage trails whenever possible. But I think the sidewalk on 63rd Street, I think in this would qualify for an exception. I would think that I'm not as familiar with McKinley sidewalk and the traffic there, but since it does connect to a trail, that might be more feasible. But my experience, and I'm out to the Scout shop a couple of times a month. That's why I couldn't remember if the Scouts have a sidewalk on their property. But I think, and no one else can give me an answer to that tonight. But I would agree that I would omit the petitioner from putting a sidewalk in this special occasion based on these circumstances.
Got something?
I didn't want to testify to that, but I simply can't remember. I didn't think there was a lot of sidewalks over there, and I didn't want to. Well, I'm not testifying. I'm just refer to the petitioners and the respondents to give the information.
All right, so I'm just going to go over what the staff recommendation is, and maybe we'll get some movement. So the staff is recommending approval of the submitted preliminary platted site plan subject to compliance with the following conditions. Number one, compliance with all administrative review comments by the Permit and Development Center. Two, provision of the 10-foot trail and tree landscaping spaced every 30 feet along Highway 28. Frontage of the property as discussed in the Move Des Moines plan. Number three, provision of architectural screening or opaque fence screening surrounding the proposed outside storage area. And four, revision of the landscaping plan to increase landscaping or provide architectural screening in areas where staff has determined that the sight lines to overhead doors and outside storage areas from public street views in the surrounding residential properties are not proposed to be adequately protected to meet the requirements of zoning condition.
May I like to ask a question and make a comment? Do that now?
Go right ahead.
My question is maybe for you, Mike. Does this piece of McKinley, the existing piece here, stay even after this gets built?
It would basically be a cul-de-sac.
So this goes away right here?
There'd be a cul-de-sac extended, basically. There would no longer be a connection.
Looks like this.
Oh, this one.
You'd see the cul-de-sac.
So if I'm not mistaken, the folks that want to walk on McKinley, that's not being changed. They can still walk on this existing piece of McKinley.
It wouldn't be called McKinley anymore. There'd be a cul-de-sac that would.
Okay, but that roadway, they can still walk on. I mean, nothing's changing there, correct?
There would be some grading and a new cul-de-sac bulb installed, but the street would still be some sort of street there as shown on that drawing.
Roadway's being taken out.
There's a segment of that that's my house.
Jason, can you point out the cul-de-sac on the drawing?
There's straight cut alignment, curved up.
There's driveway reconstruction to connect to that drive, and then it comes out to McKinley. So whether that's a public street or a private drive that has a turnaround at the end of it, that's supposed to be providing the access to those lots on the south side of McKinley.
Is it?
Right, yeah,
section
this
right
is,
here.
yeah, that's, yeah, this is.
There is no road here.
Oh, okay.
This is being eliminated. Drive is being tied in.
Drive there, and then the
Runs to
drive to the
this
west is being tied into McKinley.
Turnabout, which is required by fire and safety. So as part of our original plan, it was to provide a temporary connection and not disrupt McKinley. Staff preference and traffic and planning was to build out McKinley. That was an accommodation as part of, but the elimination of the segment felt from our best approach.
Right.
I think I have two. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a very real issue. I guess I'm.
The public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Beyond. So, my first question is, and maybe it's for you, Mike, staff, is the sidewalk that they would build on, the developer side, could it be on the McKinley side, or does that not make any sense? Sorry, on the south side. Does that not make sense? I'd like to maintain stability over. No matter what side it's on.
If you think about the future development that may occur to the west of this site, we would hopefully be getting sidewalk on the north side of McKinley that would connect, because the south side's already developed. You wouldn't probably be getting sidewalk on the south side as readily as you would on the north side of McKinley in the future. So I think we would prefer it stay on the north side, just for the opportunity to hopefully in the near future be extending that sidewalk along any subdivision that would occur north of McKinley and east of this site.
Okay. I guess the comment just to the board is I'll consider this as wish the walkability on the south side a little better. I don't really know what the answer is. I think that's a real issue. The other comment I just make to the board is, for me, actually, the number one issue here is not seeing the building. I think it's going to be a nice building. I think what they're doing on the site, very nice. For me, it's actually this water quality issue. And that's the thing that interests me the most. Most of us here know that water quality in Iowa is not apparently a priority. And so I don't know what the answer is, so I'm just sort of making a comment here that I'd be really interested if there's a way that, whether it's Mr. Knapp's folks that you've been working with, that you've been talking to, and your folks, there's some way that could get together and that could get solved really well. I mean, I have not been to your property. My assumption is it's beautiful, it's a beautiful lake, all this stuff's awesome, and this will have impact of some kind. So if there's just some way that through meetings and through shared folks that can solve better so that folks are more comfortable, that'd be my. I don't know how to.
So, Mike, what would your reaction to that be?
I'm sorry?
No, I'm asking staff how Greg's idea of, I guess I'd call it some kind of mediation or a resolution. I
don't want to make it more complicated, but maybe I am. I just feel that that's a significant issue, and I don't doubt that you guys have done some good work. You're on a good path, but I do feel that
yeah, I think
deserves some connection. That's all.
The first comment is they have to comply with the Permit and Development Center comments, which our staff has to make sure that the design meets our stormwater standards for the development. Certainly, we'd encourage continued discussions, but I don't know that we can require mediation between property owners.
I don't know that either.
I don't know that we can.
Maybe it's more of a good faith thing. Maybe it's more, I don't know. For me, it's quality, not quantity of water going over there. You know, this is a grass field, and we're taking roof water and pavement water, yucky stuff. And I'm sure you guys are going to filter it and do a great job. And I'd like to see that explained in just sort of a neighborly way. I don't mean it as a.
But let me throw this out.
I don't know.
What if we would continue this and see if the developer can't present to the neighborhood group one more time and come back? Would that do that for you?
What time frame are you thinking?
I would support that, Greg. I would support that.
I would. So I'll ask staff what time frame would
Developer?
be ideal.
Like Yes.
Can we ask a question? But the only reason I say that is I don't think you're very far off, and I think the scary part for the neighbors is that something happened today. I understand the development process and how plans have to get done and da 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 da. But the neighbors don't understand that process, and they're not privy to that process. And just a little bit more hand-holding, I think it's a good deal if my street were taken out in front of my house and I had more front yard, but that might be just a little bit more hand-holding. And for Mr. Knapp, maybe there's a way for you to save 85% of the berm. Maybe there's some way to come to some conclusion rather than just having us say, well, we think you're doing a good job, because I do. But I think there's just obviously an uncomfort level by the neighbors that just takes a little tweaking, that's all.
Excuse me. We have to record this information, and really I don't want to get into bringing people back up to the podium. So you're just saying time is of the essence, is what I heard you say, correct? You agree with 2 weeks? Oh, you have continued, okay.
I'm with you, Greg. My thing is this is permanent once it moves forward. So it's permanent for the neighbors, it's permanent for the developer. So I'd make a motion to continue it.
Till
the next meeting.
Okay. Which, remember, we don't have any more meetings.
It's in a month.
Yeah, I was just going to say we don't meet again until April 7th.
We don't have
spring break.
Yeah. But the motion, April 5th. So the motion is to continue item number 5 with the expectation that there will be some discussion with staff and developers and the neighborhoods. We'll continue this to April 5th. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so are there no's? Any nays? Okay, and did anyone abstain? I think everybody voted. Okay, so this item then is continued to what? You didn't get everybody?
9-2.
Everyone
There's
voted.
11 here.
Yeah, everyone voted. So this item has continued to our April 5th meeting. Thank you very much, all those attended. We're ready for item number 6. Which,
I know.
This is a request from Savannah Holmes for review and approval of a 6th amendment to Brook Run PUC conceptual plan to allow property at 3740 Village Run Drive, intended for neighborhood commercial development, to be divided into 3 lots for single-family residential development.
April 5th.
What was the question? Our next meeting will be
April 4th.
Oh, April.
Thursday,
April 4th.
April 4th. Chair, before we get started, I'm going to take a second to just close the door and because we have conversations and the sound.
Okay.
Chair, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. The subject property is located in the Brook Run PUD or Brook Run neighborhood. So the entire area is zoned PUD is highlighted. The focus area of the parcel that's really what we're going to discuss tonight is up in this area, up off of Douglas Avenue, north edge of the development, Village Run Drive. We are passing around response cards. There's a letter from neighborhood group. There's a fair amount. So the site's fairly small, but as a long-standing policy, we notify everybody within the PUD and then the surrounding 250 feet. So that's why we're have kind of a large notice area, perhaps a little larger than what we're accustomed to with some of our items and what you see. This is the north part of the project, the site looking towards the south. This is from the street within the development looking towards the west. The property we're really focused on is up in this corner. You can see that this is the approved plan unit development conceptual plan. Shows it as a single parcel. It was platted as a single parcel. The PUD currently allows use of this property for any use allowed in our C1 neighborhood commercial district. That district allows office uses, less intense commercial uses, multifamily. And so the proposal is to divide this out into 3 lots and allow for single family development. This is the amended plan or proposed amended plan. So you can see that the applicant is hoping to acquire the property, divide it 3 lots, single family development. It's not a rezoning, it's an amendment to the conceptual plan. So we don't need to get into, does it conform with the land use plan? Certainly the land use plan envisions residential uses in this area. It's really more about how would this site go about getting developed. So as staff, we are recommending denial of the request. And the reason for that is that this site is large enough that if it's platted out as 3 lots, those 3 lots will have to have their own stormwater facilities and maintain those. We don't think that that's something that these 3 lots over the long term are going to be able to do. It's a reasonable request to have on these 3 parcels to have their own facilities separate from everybody else. And so we think it's better to just continue on with the plan as is, leave it for a single site development. That could be a single family house on a larger lot. Could also be one of the other uses that are allowed in the C1 district. So that's the brief staff report, but it really is just down to just kind of that particular detail.
Jason, quick question.
Sorry.
Why would the 3 lot have to take care of their own?
It's plating requirement for that much land area. I don't remember how the acreage. Let me look. It's over an acre, so I mean, not necessarily like a full-on large commercial level detention basin, but they would have to have some on-site facility that would require maintenance.
So it's not about the capacity of the existing site, it's the nuance of the rule. Those 3 lots equal 1 acre?
Yeah.
Not a
So if
capacity
it,
problem.
correct, and what would happen is that you would be putting that responsibility on 3 owners, and over time and change in ownership, there's concern that the facility wouldn't be adequately maintained, and so that's why we are recommending denial of the request.
That concludes.
Yes, that's all I have.
I know people are still looking through the cards. Does anyone else have any questions? Jason?
Jason, there's an unusual number of cards. Is
Yes.
there, do you know if there's a reason behind that?
Yeah, I would venture that of the ones that I did look at, I haven't reviewed all of them, but they're focused on stormwater management issues in the development as a whole.
Yeah.
And there's concern about how the site develops and what impacts it might have upon the concerns they're facing at the currently. So it's the hard thing with this proposal is that there are issues in the broader area, but there are vested rights for this property, just like any of the other properties in the development that have been developed over the years with single-family development, townhomes, and so I'm not sure that any of them were really focused on should this be commercially developed or should it be developed with 3 houses, but the focus is more about the broader issue.
Okay. Any other questions for Jason? Oh, Greg, go
So
ahead.
do all the other homes work towards these waterways in the middle?
Let me, the development was created to have as basins and then a mixture of stormwater facilities within the street and then creeks or overland flow through the development that feeds into the basin. It's a shared system amongst the development as far as it's a private facility.
Are there issues with that?
I think there are issues that, there's erosion that a lot of the neighbors that have the creeks that run through their properties have seen a lot of erosion. And in talking to our engineering staff, what is thought to be the problem is that it's not that when this development came through at the time, the development standards really addressed your 100-year storm event or 1% events, and the more storm or the water quality control type requirements that we have nowadays weren't in place, which catch a lot of that in between storm events, and that those are really the ones that are happening more frequently that lead to some of the erosion. So that's, as I understand it, talking to our engineering staff, trying to digest what's gone on here and what's led to the concerns that I'm sure we'll hear about tonight. That's the crux of it, as my best.
Any other questions for Jason? All right, seeing none, if
Thank
the
you.
applicant wants to come forward.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Ted Grobe with Savannah Homes. It was our intent to ask the P&Z to rezone this C1 commercial site to allow the last 3 single-family lots in a neighborhood of approximately 579 homes, a neighborhood that has been developed over the last 20 years. Our stormwater impact, according to our engineer, would be about half of 1%. Normally, everyone is in favor of converting neighborhood commercial into single family. We sent out 110 invitations to our neighborhood meeting. One family attended. The south 30 feet of our parcel is covered by an easement with the Parks Department, so the usable space, the 30-foot easement that the Parks Department has, is less than an acre. Despite that, the total site covers more than an acre, and your code requires that we provide on-site stormwater detention. Ironically, if developed commercially, stormwater runoff would most likely double. We cannot provide on-site stormwater detention for 3 lots, and given the sensitivity of this issue, we're withdrawing our request and would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you're withdrawing your request for?
I'm withdrawing our request. I don't want to upset the neighbors in Brook Run. I don't want to upset the city. I don't want to upset the staff. I've stepped into a hornet's nest, and I'm going to step out of it.
Okay.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much as well. So let me just ask council, so.
I'll answer any questions if you have.
No vote is necessary, correct? Okay. So thank you very much. And just for but I do want to clarify for anyone who is here today to speak to this issue, the applicant is withdrawing the request that he had. So unless anyone, I guess I should ask, does anyone understand or have a comment about that? Sir, come forward, sir. So we will not be taking a vote. That doesn't matter, okay.
I just want to make sure you guys understand the situation. Can I have?
But I asked him if he understood we will not be taking a vote, but he has another question, correct?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we understand the reason there's a hornet's nest.
Okay. Yes, Jason.
Oh, Mick Corcoran, 3600 Village Run Drive. You look at that map, I'm from that open lot, I'm the 6th house down.
Okay.
On that lot. And we have, they may call it a creek, but it's not, it's a waterway. A drainage that should have been put a culvert in and done it correctly when the development initially started. This past summer, due to the erosion, the water will come down our waterway 6 feet deep. White water. It looks like a Colorado river. And it's taken 2 big 30-foot trees with it out of my yard. And it's taken the neighbors. It goes so fast that we had a 20-foot log, about like that big around. It took it down the creek, around a peninsula, without a problem. It was gone the next morning. And so I've lost 2 trees. My neighbor lost a tree. My neighbor to the south of me has got a tree that about 40% of the root base hangs out over the creek. It's going to come down. And this makes it a little bit different. It's just not fair to our neighborhood that something isn't being done about this erosion. You go down to this water, what do you call it? Water base? Detention. It's a mud hole. Not a pond, it's a mud hole. There's an island of mud coming out of the culvert that's probably 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. Mud. And most of that's probably my dirt. Because it's that bad. I've lost 10 feet on both sides of my waterway out of my yard. That much dirt and that much, it's just taken my shoreline away with it. We've had a lot of people come by, and I don't know, Steve worked hard on this, come by and look at this development in my backyard and up the creek and down the creek. And nobody can do anything about it.
Well, you have city staff who are here listening tonight. And so, Jason, perhaps you can give him some advice.
I think our engineering staff are very well of the concerns.
Okay.
Rather than our private. Need to be.
But I think the city needs to step up because they approved it. Irregardless of the excuse that it was back before things changed. Doesn't concern me.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is whoever approved it, and I think Steve can speak on this, whoever approved it was wrong to approve the way it was set up.
And that, of course, is not in our purview.
No, I know.
So,
I just want to start making people aware of it. That's all I want.
I think you have. You mission accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And so you two understand we're not voting on this issue, okay? And you have a brief comment.
And it's been a long night, and I appreciate your patience. And it's been long for us, too. I just appreciate speaking to you just for a moment, if I may. My name is Marty Chebahar, 3717 Brook Run Drive. I'm president of the Brook Run Village Owners Association. And we realized that what was to be a hearing tonight was about a rezoning request for one large lot in our neighborhood. But for the good people of Brook Run, it was also an opportunity for us to publicly proclaim our very real stormwater runoff threats. And therefore, the board of directors of the Brook Run Owners Association wanted to go on record opposing the proposed development now before you of the vacant land at 3740 Village Run Drive. And the opposition was overwhelmingly necessary because the impervious surfaces resulting from said development would exacerbate Brook Run's serious stormwater erosion issues. Allow me to explain. When Brook Run was planned more than 20 years ago, the decision was made to use natural creeks that flow through the area as our storm sewers. The creeks flow into and out of detention ponds, which were built to meet federal and state drainage regulation. Unfortunately, no provisions or mandates were put into place for protecting against stream bank erosion. None. In addition, city and private planners and developers saw no need to provide for public easements along the waterways, and also failed to allow for adequate maintenance easements. They may have also greatly underestimated stormwater flows through these streams, both initially and with new developments to Brook Run's east and south. So today, the creeks through Brook Run are eroding badly in some areas. In fact, a few private owners, you've just met one, are concerned about the potential for structural damage to their homes if the problem goes unabated. The association's directors share that concern. Moreover, our detention ponds, which this lady back here so rightly pointed out, our association owned, they're filling with silt. Overall, the Brook Run neighborhood is faced with a well-documented cost estimate of more than $2 million to overcome these stormwater erosion issues. The creek along Village Run Drive has some of the most severe erosion at an estimated cost to fix at over $900,000. Roofs, driveways, and other impervious structures built on the lot at 3740 Village Run Drive would feed directly into, and we believe significantly add to, the erosion mess. So in summary, here's the situation we face as elected neighborhood leaders with a duty and responsibility to represent the best interests of our neighborhood. The banks along Brook Run's creeks are eroding badly, and engineered fixes are stymied by high costs and private ownership. The detention ponds, which are owned in common and are to be managed by the association, are silting in, and yet professionals tell us that dredging would be foolish until the stream erosion is halted. Large new developments to our east and south impact us, with stormwater runoffs into the Brook Run Basin. Through all this, we're told by city representatives that Brook Run is fortunate. They tell us we're fortunate to have, in effect, open storm sewers rather than underground pipe. And that would be true. But if it were pipe, it would be in the public domain and municipal assistance might be more accessible. We're also told that our erosion problems are a private concern and that flows into Brook Run's basins meet government criteria, plain and simple. That's all we're told. In other words, we're told, smile, be happy, but we can't. Because we believe a crisis is looming, and until the situation is relieved, any development of Lot 3740 Village Run Drive should be off the table. And I would speak to items in the staff report regarding that, but that's picking at straws right now. I think I got my point across.
Thank you very much. All right, so we are now moving on to item number 7. This is let's see.
7.
Yeah, no. Where's that? Yeah. I think this is it. Okay. Item number 7 is a request from Roll-Offs Des Moines, Inc. Can we have a...
Jason, we're moving on.
Yeah.
7.
Okay.
Multitasking. It's multitasking.
Thank you so much for coming, by the way, neighbors in this area. All right, request from Roll-Offs Des Moines, Inc. In the 100 block of Southeast 15th Street for vacation of the following segments of right-of-way adjoining the applicant's property to allow site assembly. Go ahead, Jason.
Aerial in front of the commission identifying the segments of right-of-way. It's just north of where we are currently. You can see the Municipal Service Center down here at the south. So this is the Southeast 14th Street viaduct, rail lines. You probably recall that there's a fair amount of vegetation through here and quite a bit of grade change between the neighborhood to the north and then as we move towards where we are today. So these segments of right-of-way are essentially paper streets and alleys. The applicant is seeking vacation. Eventually they're hoping to expand their facility. They are located here, want to do their expansion of their the word is slipping my mind, but outdoor storage, if you will. We did do a notice. There is a card from the association going around, so that isn't reflected on the map. As staff, we're supportive. I mean, I think the thing to think about, keep in mind, when these vacation requests come before us, we're not the body that's deciding, who we selling this to, how much we selling it for. We're tasked with deciding, is the right-of-way needed for a public purpose? I don't believe that there's a need for this right-of-way to serve a public purpose. It's fine for it to be vacated and conveyed. We did have some conditions of approval, and ultimately I understand that there's one of them that the applicant doesn't agree with, and that's why we weren't able to move that into the consent agenda. But I'll run through this really quick. The easternmost 200, these are the conditions. The easternmost 200 feet of requested East Vine Street right-of-way, which is Part H of the request, shall be excluded from the vacation given the existing railroad activity. So there's concern with that's impact on the railroad facilities. 2 is the conveyance, of any requested right-of-way shall occur in accordance with a redevelopment plan as approved by the City Council. I believe this is the point of contention. And I'll let the applicant speak to that. I think they have concerns about how you stage their future rezoning request. They'd be coming back. I jumped over this. It's predominantly zoned residential. And so they'll have to get industrial zoning, so they'd be back before you. As staff, we believe that all can be facilitated, but I'll let them speak to that. 3, easements for any existing utilities shall be provided until such time they're abandoned or relocated at the applicant's expense. For any development that incorporates the right-of-way shall comply with all zoning and site plan regulations. Really just saying what has to be done, just calling it out there. Sure everybody's aware of that. Any development that incorporates the right-of-way shall comply with the tree removal mitigation ordinance. This is a requirement as well, but we wanted to draw special attention to it because this area is heavily wooded. The long-term proposal is, I believe, and I don't want to speak too much for the applicant, but I think a fair amount would be, at least at the bottom of the hill, cleared out, and that they would use this kind of in a lineal fashion for outdoor storage of equipment, junk, and debris. So roll-offs, okay. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but that's the staff rec.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Any questions? All right, applicant.
Tony Holt, or Anthony Holt, 20 East 18th Street, Des Moines, Iowa. Just to give you a brief, we've been working on this project for probably 10 years. The long cycle it takes to deal with the railroad. We actually went down the street here and developed a 14-acre plot with Keeman. Keeman ended up buying this plot. We've been before you before. We rezoned our main place. But the purpose of the land that we want along the railroad tracks is to replace this box storage lot, or roll-off boxes that we store there. And so it's a facility we've had here for several years, but that now Keeman has bought that 14 acres. So our intention is to use land that otherwise the homeless and the dumping and so forth. Sorry, wrong map. Have created. We've hauled lots of tires and garbage, and there's currently camps on this site. So our zoning that we have right now is currently in place is right here. He mentioned we had an objection to the 200 feet at the end of the street. What we are both in agreement, I think, in saying is you can't sell a piece of street that belongs to the city if it has railroad right-of-way. So we have to create a line across that last 200 feet that we're trying to ask you to vacate. But we don't want to chop it off straight. We want to get this corner because it's a necessity to enter this piece that's at a diagonal. So Joel has drawn this up. I think in the description it's probably described that way already. So we have no difficulty with this. Can't use it anyhow. And we don't want to buy something that railroad's on anyhow. So that's true there. Our plan is to come below the ridge of the trees. This used to be UP Railroad right-of-way, and the outside of it belongs to Iowa Interstate. So it was a section of land that UP couldn't get to anymore. We've spent about 18 months getting all the segments put together, buying it from the UP, And I think everybody knows that small miracle that we pulled that off. But it is done. There is a Sprint communication line running through part of it, and there's an AT&T line running through the center of it. So as far as the trees being on the bottom half on the part we're going to use, there is language within the easements that those shouldn't be there anyhow. Doesn't mean that either one of the companies did their job, but those are still there. We'll be able to cover them, but they're there. So this is our intention, long-term plan of it. Up on the top side of it, we plan to put a recycling center where we'll bring our stuff in and sort the metal and wood and so forth out. We already do that on the property. Nothing's going to change as far as what we do. It's just we're going to put it in a building and make that a cleaner process. And the building would look something like this. This is the Boone County Recycling Center. It'll be on a stair step. The hill works well with this stair step. There's over 35 feet on our side, and there's over 50 on the hill. But from down here where our scale is, where the building is, to the top of the street, it's over 35 feet of rise. So we'll eventually put a building there, and the idea would be to sort that there. To give you an elevation drop, as he says, the land is quite severe rise. Anybody that's been down the road is going to look over there on the bank. We're talking from grade level railroad tracks to the top of the hill at some points is over 65 feet. We have no intentions, as this map shows, of removing any of this top where my finger is. We will leave a buffer along the top of the road on 16th Street of the 25 feet. This is all zoned M1 already. The street, of course, doesn't have zone. So the residential that we speak of is more along here. This square property that we have is already currently in the M1 zoning. Everything that's below this is M2, and we do have our conditional use. So the other thing to consider on our neighbors to the end, as we know, coming this way, the city's okayed a transfer station for the railroad on what used to be the 14 acres on the other side of Martin Luther King here. So our use of what we're trying to do with this, we'll have railroad tracks between us, but then our neighbor on the lower side is going to be the railroad, help me with the word, what did you call the new center that you're wanting to be built in this 14 acres? The transload facility. Thank you. So our neighbors on the other side will be the transload facility. Of course, we have the elevator as an immediate neighbor, and the neighbors on the top will look right over top of everything we have. Fair bit of dumping at the end of these streets that we feel if we get this, we can fence that off. Probably still can't protect everything because we live on dead ends. Crazy things happen. But we try to be good neighbors. We donate. There is a lot of homeless. We realize that's a problem. If we do get this paved, I think it'd be a quicker way to go down and see who's there and what's happening. Right now, been a few fires set back in the back here and so forth, and there's no access really to it right now.
So are you able to kind of summarize
I'm good.
Yeah.
I realize we all been here a long time, so is that good enough for you? I do have a couple pictures if you want to see.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So it sounds like your concern is with not the second condition of the cities, but with the first, the easternmost 200 feet of right-of-way, and you're asking, as I understood it, you're asking for a diagonal across that road so that you can do what you need to do?
We need the diagonal just because basically you got to go 50 foot off a center line. Center of the Iowa interstate line. And Vine Street at the very end is 25 feet to our property. 200 feet down is where it exits. All we're saying is give us the diagonal of it so that we can properly fence it and use it. And it'll help us close right to the end of the fence.
Jason, is that something we can do?
What I would suggest maybe is just altering the language to just say, to the satisfaction of the city engineer, and then that would allow us to, as staff, work with him and our engineering staff. I don't think we can resolve it tonight as to what is that precise alignment, but I think if you added that, then that would give us the out to let the city engineer make that call.
I'm in full agreement. I mean, real estate already said that's the way it would be. I don't think we have any, you know what I mean? You don't want to leave a little chunk in my mind because the railroad's going to do it. On the second point, if we have to go through 3 meetings to finally get this, you're going to okay to do it, then I'm going to come back to you again with full zoning and run 3 more meetings to get zoning. And so I would like to hopefully carry your confidence that what I want to do doesn't need a complete site plan or planning, but to allow me to start zoning as soon as this is. And can you help explain that better? Well, Mr. Hub, I guess the question I have is, part of the reason why we've asked for that condition is staff, and from the commission's perspective, I would assume before we go to a lot of hearings on a rezoning, I think we'd rather know whether or not council really has any desire for a salvage yard to go on the property. To recall, this Carroll Auto Salvage was down here. We bought out Carroll Auto Salvage and put the Southeast Connector, Martin Luther King, extended through this area. And I don't know for certain whether a salvage yard use on there is what they're looking for. And I think as part of the conveyance, that would be where they would get the chance to at least look at that. Hold on. We're not talking a salvage yard on this property. You'd be recycling materials, which would classify it as a salvage yard under our zoning code. So I understand your operation, but my point would be, our recommendation was that run that by the council on the conveyance. And if the council's willing to sell the property for that use, that's a pretty clear indication when the zoning comes back to this commission as to whether or not it's council's desire to have the use there. And so that was our point on the condition, was really to gauge council's interest on that. So is there a misunderstanding here? Because my understanding is on the M1 zoning that we'd be asking for, we have full rights to store empty boxes, roll-off boxes under that zoning.
You could store outside equipment, yes.
Outside equipment. And that's what we're going to ask for. We're not asking for salvage on this piece that it's stored on. Okay? We already have that conditioned use up on our piece.
But we're spending a lot of time talking about the use, and this is a request about whether or not the right-of-way is needed for a public purpose.
I understand.
And so that's the real question, and we're asking for direction from council on whether or not the conveyance, and then we can come back and revisit the rezoning and the use in front of the commission at that time. But the purpose of tonight is whether or not that right-of-way is necessary for a public purpose. The only thing we've identified as staff that's necessary is whatever portion of that 200 feet
that you brought up, maybe not the whole thing, and if we can amend that condition to address the portions of it that can be vacated, that could proceed through council, and we can come back if they convey it. Make sense?
It does. I just wanted to make clear what we're doing with this straight away, that we're not asking for that process to take place back here.
And we don't need to, right, have that determined right now. It sounds like, I mean, I think it sounds like regardless of the use, we probably do want to check in with city council to make sure that it makes sense. So I guess I would just move, or I guess we're not at that point yet. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
right,
but keep hold your thought.
Yep.
So I guess at this point, I'm going to ask if there's anybody else who wishes to speak in favor of this project. You do, sir. You're in favor? Okay, step to the mic and state your name and address, please.
My name is Cruz Mata. I live at 1533 East Vine. I need your help. Sure, Cruz. I need you to move this up a little, right this area. Right in here. This is my residence right in here. I've been there for more than 40 years. And I was really glad and happy that, like he said, that they fixed the MLK and took away all that, junks. And because if you live around a junkyard, you probably can tell there's a lot of rats and all kinds of stuff coming up. And sometimes they come into your house, and you don't want that. So my concern is, first of all, I'm glad that he's cleaning the back here, because there was a lot of debris, like he says, and he cleaned it up. He took a lot of tires, a lot of garbage out of there. At the same time, he's knocking down a lot of trees down there. So there's a couple of concerns to me, and I want to make it short. I know it's late. One is, my concern is the erosion, because as he said about the topography of this area, it just goes downhill. The more trees he takes down, the more of erosion we're going to have. That's one. And when you start changing the zoning area in here, you're creating the same thing again of what you just got away from. I mean, like you said, we just got rid of all this junk, junkyards. Now you're permitting the junkyards to come back, because he doesn't have junk cars. But guess what's in those containers? Take a wild guess. Debris of all kinds. And what do you think that's going to attract? That's pretty simple what's going to happen. And I don't know what the plan is as far as what he's going to do back there. I mean, I'm glad that he's doing something, but I wasn't notified about this. I had to go out there and talk to him about it. I didn't know he bought all this land. I didn't know what his intentions are doing. And at this point, I don't know what he's going to do as far as what changes he's going to make there. So by changing this zoning area, that's going to give him a right to go right back to where we were before. All the neighbors around here are going to be affected just like they were before. That's just not one or two neighbors. There's a lot of people that live in this area. And we were glad that it changed, because it changed for everybody down here as far as no more rats and no more garbage. But yet at the same time, it's coming back again. And you're the only one that can change that. So that's my concern. My concern is the erosion. I don't know what he's going to do back here. I don't have no idea what his plans are as far as. I understand that right in here, he's going to make a turnaround for the trucks to come in there and pick up the containers. Well, guess where the containers are going to be at? All along here. And I don't know. That's all I know about this plan. So I appreciate your time. I know it's late, Thank you very much for your time, and that's all I wanted to say.
So Mr. Mata, if there was a rezoning request, we would send notices out again, and
I
there would be
wasn't
the opportunity
notified.
to come. There would be the opportunity to come to the meeting and speak on a rezoning or a concept at that point on design. But tonight is just the right of way necessary for a public purpose.
Might want to meetings where this won't get noticed, but you'll want to check the agendas. This spring, the vacation item will go to rezoning. City council.
Well, it's just a matter that's pretty simple. I mean, you go 2 steps forward, and then you want to try to go 3 steps backwards, and I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else that wishes to address this proposal? All right, so you do have an opportunity if you just wanted to respond to anything that he brought up.
They have been an active supporter of the neighborhood, the Capitol View neighborhood. We go to most of the meetings. We try to attend them. Everything that we are doing now, nothing's really going to change except for the matter of storage of it. As far as grain and all the things down there, if you want to see a interesting amount of food for animals, go up at the elevator. We're not going to change that. We feel that we're going to make the place better, and part of it is already zoned accordingly. It was at our pre-app meeting that they suggested that we come in and do this. Trying to follow staff's recommendations and broaden it out, and we will be here to be good neighbors. As he said, he's been in our office a couple times already. We've talked a couple times. I'm only trying to be a good neighbor.
All right, any other questions? Applicant? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I think, did you, David, have?
Well, I thought I did, but then I was trying to figure out exactly how to word it. So it sounds like, I mean, I'd like to move staff with amendment to number 1. And I think, and help me if this isn't right, but I was thinking something along the lines of a sufficient portion of the requested East Vine Street right-of-way shall be excluded from the vacation given the existing railroad activity. Such portion will be determined by the planning administrator?
City engineer.
City engineer, sorry. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
All right, that's what I move.
So the motion is to move staff recommendation with the amendment or revision to item number 1, which I won't repeat. He just read that. Item number 2, item number 3, item number 4, and item number 5 remain as staff recommended.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Was there any, did everyone vote? Were there any? We're good. So thank you very much. Item number 8 is the request from AMT Associates for rezoning of property located at 1315 East Broadway.
Aerial identifying the subject property, close proximity to East 14th Street, Broadway Avenue to the north. That's the property has frontage on Broadway. A couple of response cards going around. Response map. Quick photographs of the property. This is the drive looking south and west, looking down Broadway towards the west, along the front of the property. This is the rear portion of the property where the addition and then the subject storage area. Relocated, construction's underway. So in the staff report, we noted the previous rezoning for this area. In 2006, a larger area that encompassed this site was approved for rezoning by the city council. I won't read all the conditions they had. There's quite a number of them. But as part of that rezoning and all the conditions, there was a focus on including landscaping and general appearance standards. And as part of that, there was a restriction that placed that required outdoor storage of equipment and materials to be at least 250 feet from the south line of Broadway, the right-of-way of Broadway, and then required screening of outdoor storage areas. With, as the chair noted in the agenda, the request is to lift the specific condition that requires the screening of the fencing to be a wood material, 100% opaque. The site plan, this is they have a site plan that was recently approved to allow their project to move forward, knowing that they were going to come before you. But this shows what the site was previously and had outdoor storage area that had chain link fence with slats. That was approved in error by a previous site plan. So that got caught when they're coming back through the process to do a new site plan, which replaces what was going to be, or what was their storage with an addition, and then pushes the storage area further to the south. You can see the trash enclosure. So their intent, or the reason for the request, is they'd like to reuse the fencing that they had. Our perspective as staff is that we need to follow the original intent of the zoning conditions. It's unfortunate that it was missed on a previous site plan, but that does not negate the purpose and the mission of what that condition was. So as staff, we are recommending denial of their request to lift that specific condition. Removing zoning conditions is a rezoning process. It goes through the exact same process as zoning the property does. So that's why we have a hearing here. It'll go on to city council for 3 readings as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant, please come forward.
Lance Aerosmith, AMT Associates, 1315 Northeast Broadway, Des Moines. I own the property as well as American Topper and Accessories and Line X, which utilizes the property on Broadway. As Jason said, this is a picture of the fence in question. It's a 12-foot tall chain link fence with vinyl slat. I want to start by saying this isn't a request for a new fence on a new property. This is a request just to reuse fence that we've already been using for 11 years prior to putting the addition in. With the addition of the construction of the addition, it's actually going to push this fence back about 75 feet from the roadway. Right now, it sits about right at 250 feet from Broadway itself. This is going to push it back to 325 feet away from the roadway. And I agree, it's not 100% opaque by any means, but it's probably about 80% opaque. And as you can see, even from 25 feet away, you almost can't see through it anyways. And this photo is probably roughly 175 feet. And again, this is still in our parking lot. This isn't even from the road. When it's all done, it's going to be almost twice this visual distance away from the road. And it looks good. I mean, those vinyl slats, we chose them on purpose because they match the color of the primary structure of the building. When we originally built that, we looked at masonry, we looked at wood. We went with the chain link with the vinyl slats and got it approved because it was, it was a good looking product and it was going to last for us. Use of masonry, that's just for a small business, it's cost prohibitive. I mean, 178 lineal feet of 12-foot tall masonry is just way too expensive. So it wasn't even an option for us. So that leaves us looking at wood. Yeah, 12-foot tall, pressure treated, green wood fence of that size. Honestly, it'd look ugly. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose of that ordinance and keeping the properties in there looking at it. It's not a good look at all. Over time, that fence, it's just going to deteriorate, it's going to degrade, and it's going to fall apart. No matter how much we maintain, it's just something that's going to happen with wood. And again, that's why we're requesting the use of this fence, because it looks good, it's durable, and it's going to last. And it's been there for 11 years already. And it hasn't really affected, the property values or the sellability of the adjacent lots. We were actually the first place to build in that development on those lots. And since then, there's been 4 other purchases, improvements made on those properties. So obviously, it's really not affecting, what anybody thinks of the property. And so just in conclusion, we're requesting that we're able to reinstall that fence and that's already been there. We're going to move it away from the street another 75 feet. With masonry being cost prohibitive, we really don't want to use wood, even though that'd be the only other viable option. And we feel that that's actually meeting the spirit of what that ordinance was actually put in place for, was to make the properties look better. That's all I have. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So you're going to use the posts again and the chain link again and all the vinyl slats again? Or will it be new stuff?
We would still use the chain link with the slats in it. We would have to put in new posts though, because in order to get those are set in concrete. In order to get them out, they destroyed the posts, so all new posts. And we had professionals take it down. Des Moines Steel Fence took it down. They're storing it for us, and they'd be the ones installing it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. This is the shortest one of the night.
You should have been.
Yeah, you. So it doesn't look like we're going to have any other comments, and so I don't think we need to have you come back. I'll close the public hearing. It's a pleasure, the commission.
I'll make a comment. I rant and rave and hate vinyl slats and chain link. I hate it. Hate it. It's ugly. However, the city screwed up and they allowed it, and I'm somewhat sympathetic and I want to slap myself for saying it. But he's not reusing it all, and that's why I asked the question. He's only using part of it. And I think there might be an alternative that's not precast concrete or masonry or wood, and it might be some other metal. He's going to have new posts anyway. And so I will resist a lot to agree to vinyl slats, but I'm willing to hear what the rest of you think.
Brother Ray, did you have a comment that I saw your?
For me, this is an example of the 100% opaque rule, a little stringent. I think because of its location, you could specify that it's only for this. You can't build it more, you can't expand it, you can't put it in the front of the building. I think we could put a few sort of requirements on it, especially when I see the photos. I would support it.
I'm also think that actually looking at the photographs, it consistently matches his building materials more so than wood or masonry. So, and I don't like to have too many burdensome regulations, but I think for this exception, I would let it slide this time.
Make a motion.
Yes, I was going to say, anyone care to
Uh,
come up with something?
You want me to come up with a motion?
Yes, please.
Michael asked for some suggestions on the motion.
Well, Part A is recommending that it's found in conformance.
That we
It's
accept, I'll
already
accept
in
that.
one. And Part B, you'd be striking the staff recommendation and recommend approval of the amended zoning condition to allow this chain link with slats. I would suggest if you do make that motion, that condition limit it to this property.
Yes.
I was going to say that too.
I'll make that a motion, and with this exception will be limited to this property only.
All right, any questions about? Yeah.
If I could offer an amendment, friendly amendment, that it remains to the rear of the building and that its size remains the size. If he wants to expand it, all rules are off.
I accept that friendly amendment.
All right. Yeah. You ready to vote?
Yes.
Expand that. All right, we have a recommendation. Part A is in agreement with staff. Part B is to allow the requested rezoning with, I can't remember how you said that, with limited to this property.
Limited to this property only.
That was it?
Yes.
Same size, same location.
Same size, same location.
Well,
On the back.
Right.
As
rear.
yeah,
Yeah.
rear of building,
All
rear
those in
of building.
favor,
Going on the
please
site plan.
signify by raising your hand.
All
those in favor? All right, is there any opposition? Seeing none, motion carries. Congratulations, sir.
He needs to go to council still.
That's true. Yeah, this is step one. Step one. But they do read our recommendation. All right, so that concludes. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Our items tonight. I was remiss in the beginning in introducing our new commission member, Emily Webb.
Emily, hello.
Oh, I hope we didn't scare you away tonight.
3.5 hours.
Sometimes they're 5 minutes.
They're always like this. This is a good one.
So, any other director business? Seeing none, Mike, you have anything? Nope. All right, meeting adjourned.